Alright, we're back. Apparently my stream froze. I was talking to myself for like a half hour and I was like, I should take a break and run errands anyways. But I got to 25. Wait, how much time has this got? Oh yeah, tons of time.
Can't do that here. Out of energy. Low on energy. I'm not ready. Low on energy. Need more energy. We got separated.
What am I looking for? Oh, key. Damn it. Is it set so it's always in the last one you check?
Need more energy.
Seriously.
Low on energy.
It's a piercer. Oh, nice. I don't think. Yeah. Not enough of damage jump. What door? Oh, that door.
I need more time.
Down here, I guess? Yep.
Power of energy. I'm not ready yet.
$113.89. Oh, okay, yeah, so it does carry over. That's dope. Oh. Man, it already has the centrifuge thing.
Low on energy. I need more time.
Oh, yeah, chest or something? Just the drop? Every third cast puncture.
Today, we're talking about police releasing Carly Russell's 911 call and saying her version of events are looking kind of suspect. While the ice cream may be so good, TikTok's biggest NPC creator is being accused of fraud. Protests are raging in India after a horrific viral video. And a lot of y'all lied to me in those comments. We're talking about all that and so much more in today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, so buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. Starting with, this Carly Russell situation is a mess. So the Hoover police finally broke their silence in the Carly Russell case yesterday, and holy shit did they drop bomb after bomb. But first, we need to talk about the version of events that Russell told detectives. They're going like this. When she gets out of her car to approach her toddler, a man comes out of the trees and mumbles that he's checking on the baby. The man then picks her up and she screams, dropping her phone, and then forcing her to go over a fence and into the car. Eventually, she's in the trailer of an 18-wheeler. And there, she hears the voice of a woman alongside the man as well as a baby front. They're describing the man as being white with orange hair and a bald spot on the back. And at some point, she escapes the trailer on foot, but then she's captured and put back in a car. Their abductors blindfolding her, but notably not tying her up because they don't want to leave impression marks on her wrist. They then bring her into a house, undress her, and take pictures of her. Russell here saying she doesn't remember any physical or sexual contact. The next day, she wakes up, the woman gives her cheese and crackers, she plays with her hair, and then at some point, after being put in a vehicle again, she escapes and runs through the woods, emerging near her home. When she told all this to the detectives, they noted that she had a small injury on her lip, she said her head was hurting, and her shirt was torn. Them also finding $107 in her sock. And the police's story here is a little different, and it actually begins in the days leading up to Russell's disappearance with her internet search history. Because 2 days before the incident, she reportedly searches, "Do you have to pay for an Amber Alert?" Then, at 1 in the morning on the day that she went missing, she searches how to take money from a register without being caught. And then an hour later, she searches Birmingham bus station, and shortly after that, one-way ticket from Birmingham to Nashville, with the departure date there being that same day. Then around noon, she searches for the Liam Neeson movie Taken, which the police noted is about an abduction. While at work, she makes 2 more searches regarding Amber Alerts, including one about the maximum age for an alert. The police chief then saying,
"There were other searches on Carly's phone that appeared to shed some light on her mindset, but out of respect for her privacy, we will not be releasing the content of those searches at this time."
Then at 8:20 p.m., Russell leaves work to go and pay a show. He's concealing a bathrobe, toilet paper, and other items belonging to the business. Next, she orders food from a restaurant, then picking up granola bars and Cheez-Its from a Target. Finally, she drives onto the interstate where she makes this 911 call.
I am on Interstate 459, and there is a kid just walking by themselves. It's a white t-shirt, and it doesn't look like he has any pants on. It looks like a diaper. You in a shoe box? No, not that I can see.
There's also this one really strange detail about the call, and it's not in the audio, because the police say the data from her phone shows that she traveled roughly 600 yards or some 1,800 feet during the call. So assuming she was following the child that whole time, this barefoot toddler would have had to run the length of 6 football fields in less than 3 minutes. Plus, the police also noting how strange it is that Russell was the only person to report a toddler on the interstate despite numerous cars driving through there at the time. It's also the weirdness she keeps on coming, because when the cops arrive, they find her wig and her cell phone in the grass, as well as her purse and the things she wore in the car. However, police say neither the snacks she got from Target nor the items she took from work were found anywhere on the scene. So wrapping it all up, the police chief says they've requested a second interview with Russell, but she hasn't granted one yet, adding,
What we can say is that we've been unable to verify most of Carly's initial statement made to investigators, and we have no reason to believe that there is a threat to the public safety related to this particular case.
And so as of recording, that's where we are with this situation. Obviously, we're going to have to wait for more details from the police investigation. In the meantime, a lot more doubt has been cast on Russell's story, and people are becoming angry.
Carly, bitch, you was lying this whole motherfucking time. You got me on here acting like I'm Oprah Winfrey hoe. Bitch, I done killed off every single one of my laughing hoes because I'm so stressed out about you, bitch. This why they don't believe us when we be missing, bitch.
But with the general argument being, if she did fake all this for whatever reason, there's a fear that this is going to hurt black women in the future who go missing. But when it comes to media coverage, even though black women reportedly make up a disproportionate share of such disasters you see on TV, usually some young white woman. That's why when Russell first went missing, you had people hoping, hey, at least this story might be able to shed some light on a very real issue. But now, honestly, who knows what effect it's going to have. But in the meantime, as we wait for more details to come, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. And then, the internet's new biggest star might be lying to you. I know you're thinking, what? On the internet, someone's lying? Unbelievable. What's next? And that star in question is Pinky Doll, someone who may or may not be aware of. Which, if you're not aware of her, what I'm about to say is going to sound made up. She is a massive part of TikTok's NPC, or like player character tree, where you have creators mimicking pre-programmed video game characters that players or viewers interact with the majority of the NPC content happening on live streams where creators respond to repetitive phrases as they receive tips from viewers. And the Washington Post saying Pinky Doll and other creators are sitting in this genre at the intersection of gaming and sexual. Pinky Doll in particular has absolutely blown up. I mean, not only does she have tens of thousands of confirmed viewers that are actively tipping her, we even have outlets like the New York Times and NBC News writing about it. Best known for her catchphrases like,
Coconut so good. Grab, 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 balloon. Grab. Ice cream so good.
but then comes the controversy. Some social media users claiming that she's been lying about her age. Because when you read, let's say, the New York Times profile on her, it says that she's 27 years old. And you have outlets like Popgrade noting that she herself previously claimed she was born in April of 1996, which would make her 27. But allegedly, the age she previously listed on her TikTok profile was much younger. Because while there's no age listed now, there are screenshots that show that it used to say that she was 19. And if you take a quick trip on the Wayback Machine, it shows that as recently as yesterday, she had 19 years old in her bio. There is also resurfacing a screenshot of a tweet from earlier this year where it appears that she claimed to be as young as 15. But it's worth noting there that the main controversy seems to be about her pretending to be 19. So with that, you have people accusing her of lying about her age and pretending to be younger to potentially boost her following. People saying things like,
Amulets, chest
"You knew that
plates,
the
or
birds would like her
gauntlets.
more if she's younger. And all of that is kind of divided into several conversations, starting with people who are kind of outraged and disgusted, saying she capitalized on her culture's gross obsession with sexualizing teenage girls by creating a younger online persona as a way to maximize her profits. But then you also had a ton of people saying it's worth exploring why some women lie about their age, with one writing, she's a weirdo for engaging in this, yes. However, we should extend the convo out to discuss why women make more money when they're perceived as younger, incentivizing them to lie about it, especially when they make
Hey, Radic.
culture fetish
What's up, man?
content. Because I'd bet a majority of those tips.
Yeah, I got nothing else to play, and it's the first day of the season, so I said fuck it.
Successful when they're perceived as younger. But arguing for men in some industries, it's the opposite. But for women, it's almost always the case. Rigged games require a different set of rules. Also, with this whole pinky doll
My horse
situation
doesn't
and
completely
NPC
lag out.
situation, if you're wondering why are people doing this, well, I mean, duh, it's the money. The pinky doll telling the New York Times that she has made $2,000 to $3,000 per stream. And when you include socials like Instagram and OnlyFans, she says she earns $7,000 a day, which is also part of the reason we've seen kind of just a lot of everyday people jump on this trend, as well as even big names. Right with us on TikTok, you've seen everyday people saying they made several $100s
Yes, sir.
to several hours.
What are you playing?
Like Kai Cenat, iShowSpeed, and Trisha Paytas doing NPC streams. Kai making several $1,000s in an hour. Well, I can't speak to the already famous people that are doing this. I will say, while a lot of the reactions to this whole NPC thing have been like, wow, this is so cringe. Look at the like how shitty entertainment has become. In no world am I gonna shame 98% of the people that are jumping on this trend. If I was in my early 20s again, working some shitty job, just trying to pay rent, and you said I could make several $100s per hour doing this goofy shit, I'm doing that goofy shit. Sounds a million times better than when I was working in a call center with people yelling at me for 12 hours at a time, having to fake a smile while I serve my Sunday brunch regulars, knowing full well they're gonna tip me with a prayer card. Fuck those jobs. Ice cream's so good. Well, you can say these live streams and this content, it's kind of fetish content. I mean, it is. If someone's spending money to kind of puppet master you, to a certain degree, isn't that all paid jobs? You're doing your little dancey dance because someone's throwing money at you. Granted, your little dancey dance looks different than this, but it's a dancey dance. Even with me doing my job right now, I'm just moving my hips to the music. But hey, we talked about several different aspects of this news story, and any that stood out to you, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down
I'm
below.
gonna crash,
Man, a lot
aren't
of y'all are liars. Remember when Netflix announced that they were going to crack down on password sharing? People were like, not on my watch, I'm unsubscribing. Well, if you did, you're in the minority. Because we now know in the second quarter of this year, Netflix added 5.8 million subscribers, which is ahead of their expectation of just 1.8 million. And many saying that this boost is likely the result of many non-paying users now signing up for their own accounts. Which is why you have outlets like the Los Angeles Times saying that more password crackdowns at other streamers could be on the horizon if Netflix's trajectory continues. Because if it works for Netflix,
They are definitely gonna crack down on password sharing everywhere now.
Important note, even though Netflix did exceed subscription expectations, the company's stock still fell last night since it didn't meet revenue expectations, which may or may not be connected to Netflix making headlines for other moves, including the fact that it has now gotten rid of its cheapest ad-free plan in the US and UK. And saying on its Help Center page, the basic plan is no longer available for new or rejoining members. If you are currently on the basic plan, you can remain on this plan until you change plans or pay for your account. Right, and that plan was kind of the middle ground. I don't want ads, but I don't want to spend it on delay. So now you have users left between the plan with that, which is $7 per month, or the standard plan, which is $15.49, or you can ball out with premium for $20. With all that, many people believing this is an effort to drive more people to the cheaper ad tier, because while the company says that it's neutral on what package you choose, it is also said that the ad tier brings in higher revenue per subscriber than the standard plan does. And with this, I'd ask your thoughts and what you're going to do with this news, but if the last time is any indication, no one's telling the truth. Everybody's standing for something in the comments, but when it comes to actions, what, I'm supposed to not watch Too Hot to Handle? And then, are you maybe a busy parent, or maybe you're a busy person, you're just looking for an easy way to feel energized throughout the day and get your daily dose of vitamins, minerals? And who doesn't want to get 100+ health benefits loaded into one scoop for more productive days? Well, thanks to today's sponsor, Beam, you may need to look no further than Core. Right, and since I've incorporated Core into my daily routine, I've noticed like the mental fog and the afternoon slump, less of that, but also increased stamina in my workouts, and I'm no longer reaching for that afternoon cup of coffee. And Core has 16 science-backed vitamins, minerals, and adaptogens, including KSM-66 ashwagandha, which is clinically proven to reduce cortisol, aka the stress hormone. Like every morning before coffee, I just put 1 scoop into water, stir it, add ice, and drink. It's delicious, and I've been enjoying their new summertime watermelon flavor, and it has no sugar. So just head on over to shopbeam.com/Phil and use code DeFranco to get 35% off your first month subscription and 20% off all your following orders. Plus, you can still pause and cancel at any time, and there's no risk, and you'll get a free frother with your first order. Take advantage while it lasts. And then, we're seeing widespread outrage in India after a horrific video went viral this week showing 2 naked women being paraded and molested by a mob of men. The incident reportedly actually happening back in May, but it wasn't widely known about it until it took off on Twitter on Tuesday. Also, according to reports, there may have been a 3rd victim, but she wasn't visible on the video. And it also gets worse because beyond the humiliation and getting assaulted in public, one of the women has been reportedly gang raped in broad daylight while the other 2 escaped. And so this viral video has sparked widespread protests throughout India and Manipur, and many have demanded answers from Prime Minister Modi. Questions like, why has only one person gotten in trouble despite the fact that you can so clearly you see so many faces in the video. Modi finally answering this morning when he said in an address, "My heart is filled with pain. It is filled with anger," saying this incident is
There we
shameful
go.
in any civil society. Then going on to say that what happened would never be forgiven and that a thorough investigation is currently underway and we will ensure strict action is taken against all the perpetrators, including considering the possibility of capital punishment. And as fucked as this entire situation is, it's also just the tip of the iceberg, where you'll notice that a lot of the signs in the protests say "Stop Rape" or similar slogans. That's because it's increasingly been used as a weapon in Manipur, which has been rocked by decades of violence between various political and ethnic groups, all vying for different goals. But this time, the conflict revolving around the minority Kuki ethnic group and the majority Métis. And the Kuki women in the video were reportedly targeted by Métis men as revenge for what ended up being a fake news report that a Métis woman was raped by a Kuki man. But also, the reality is that even though this is the most public procedure, there have been other incidences the two groups have been going at it for a long time. Things really kicking off again back in May because of disputes over tribal lands, citizenship, and tribal status of the various groups in Manipur that some have described as complicated as the Israel-Palestine conflict. And then, the Swedish embassy in Iraq was attacked, and it's all centered around the Quran. Because tensions between Iraq and Sweden kicked off last month when an Iraqi man living in Stockholm burned a Quran. He then threatened and got police approval to burn another one alongside an Iraqi flag in front of the Iraqi embassy. And in response, we saw protesters in Baghdad storm the Swedish embassy, setting part of it on fire and occupying it for hours. And while Iraq's government promised to prosecute those who stormed the embassy, it also wasn't exactly happy with Sweden either, threatening diplomatic repercussions of the Quran and flag burning when as planned. Well, with that, the Swedish police didn't stop it, and two men desecrated the Quran and Iraqi flag earlier today, but didn't burn them. But either way, Iraq cut off diplomatic relations and kicked the Swedish ambassador out while recalling their own staff. Additionally, some Swedish companies are losing their licenses to operate in Iraq. So for now, we're going to keep our eye on this, see if this continues to spiral in as Muslim countries follow the advice of Iraq's current leader to cut ties with nations that allow Quran burning. And then, Republicans in Alabama appear to be so determined to undermine black voters that they're literally defying the Supreme Court. Because last month, we saw the conservative Supreme Court make an absolutely shocking 5-4 decision to uphold a lower court ruling that tossed Alabama's congressional map out on the grounds that it discriminated against black voters and violated the Voting Rights Act. And that because despite the fact that nearly a third of voters in the state are black, the GOP had drawn the congressional map so that only one of the state's 7 districts had a black majority. Which, I mean, you have to know, with this Supreme Court, for them to be like, that crosses a line, that has to be so egregious. So as part of the decision, the Supreme Court directed Alabama to comply with a federal court order to redraw the map so at least 2 districts had at least close to a majority of black voters. Which, I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but seems like pretty fucking simple direction. Just make one more district with majority black. But that, apparently too much for the Alabama GOP. The Republicans in both the state house and Senate passing 2 different maps this week that notably did not have a majority or near majority of black resident voters. And this despite the fact that the Democrats literally drew a map for them that would make another black majority district. The Republicans just shot that down in favor of their own version, which again, do not do with the Supreme Court order. Instead, both of the GOP bills redraw the lines of the state's 2nd congressional district to increase the number of black voters below levels the Democrats and voting rights advocates say are acceptable to comply with the Supreme Court. Right now, black voters only make up 30% of the 2nd district, but the bill passed by the House would raise that to 42%, whereas the Senate version is just about 38%. The Republicans in both chambers arguing that these increases are enough to meet the standards set out by the federal court. Because you know how if there's $10 and you have $6 and I have $4, I have a near majority of the money. But ultimately, that's where we are. Obviously, these 2 bills are going to be reconciled. So it's possible the Republicans will ultimately agree with 58%, 2%. But as far as what's actually going to happen, we hear the legislature has until Friday to pass a final map. Notably, the court that initially forced Alabama to redraw its maps could strike down the new map and draw its own version, with the possibility that several Democrats are betting on. What's more, voting rights groups have also promised to change GOP support. And then, $92 trillion. That is the record amount of global public debt, meaning both domestic and foreign debt, held by governments around the world in 2022, with it rising more than 5 times since the year 2000, even outpacing economic growth, which only tripled in that time. But as much as Republicans and some Democrats like to show about our growing national debt in the United States, we pay pittance compared to billions of other people. Or will the U.S. spend 5 times as much on healthcare as it did on interest payments from 2019 to 2021? At least 19 developing nations currently spend more money on interest payments and education, and 45 spend more on interest than health expenditure, meaning that put together, almost 40% of the developing world, we're talking about 3.3 billion people, are spending more on debt than on healthcare or education, which is also why a recent UN report warns that we're seeing a 3rd world debt crisis similar to the one that exploded in the 1980s, and saying the number of countries facing high levels of debt has increased sharply from only 22 countries in 2011 to 59 countries in 2022, with poor nations' total public debt almost doubling to 60% of GDP over roughly the same time period. And as for why this has happened, I mean, we could honestly spend an hour talking about the history, from colonial colonialism to the Cold War to the global financial system that we have today. But for brevity's sake, I'm just going to focus on some trends in the past few years, starting with the most obvious, the pandemic, which caused a global recession that reduced first world demand for third world goods, and that resulting in countries worldwide borrowing more money to keep paying their bills, and that putting them in a more vulnerable position for what happened next, namely Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which caused inflation to soar even more than it already had, especially for food and fuel. And so in response, we saw central banks and wealthy countries raising interest rates, which made the dollar a more attractive investment. And as the dollar grew stronger and stronger against other currencies, it became harder for poor countries to keep servicing their dollar-denominated debt, because they bring in dollars by exporting, but exports dropped, and they lose dollars by importing, but imports cost more. And the debt they needed dollars to pay for got more expensive. So unsurprisingly, some countries couldn't handle the squeeze and they defaulted, starting with Zambia in 2020, followed by Sri Lanka and Ghana last year. And analysts fear that many more, including Egypt, Pakistan, and Tunisia, are nearing the edge, which key thing isn't just bad for them, it is bad for everyone else because that affects the world economy. Though of course it especially hits those countries because they're now paying so much of their already meager savings to keep foreign creditors off their backs that they have little left over to spend on their own people. Or the number of countries that spend 10% or more of public revenues on interest payments increased from 29 in 2010 to 55 in 2020. And that is 165 million more people fell into poverty worldwide since 2020, according to the UN. And reportedly doing enough to lift those people out of poverty would cost just $14 billion. When you consider how quickly the US mobilized $400 billion to bail out Silicon Valley Bank, you begin to see why many think we're not doing enough. So you have UN officials calling for wealthy nations to provide debt relief through payment suspensions, longer lending terms, lower interest rates, and even outright debt forgiveness. But unlike similar debt relief programs in the 1990s, today's third world
I already have
debt
one of the
is hard to
statues.
restructure or write off. And that's because while most debt back then was held by
Well, at least I know where to
individuals
get the other one.
the IMF and World Bank, today most of it's actually held by private creditors who charge higher interest rates and offer shorter maturities. In fact, public creditors hold 62% of external public debt, which is up from 47% a decade ago. And also over the past 20 years, China has grabbed an even bigger share of third world debt. Beijing has been very reluctant to relieve its debtors, at least until its Western peers and private creditors pick up the slack as well. So this more diverse pool of lenders is one of the reasons why governments have made so little progress dealing with the crisis. But that is where I'm going to leave you for now, and we're going to have to keep our eyes on the situation. And that is where today's daily dive into the news is going to end. But remember, for more news you need to know, I got you covered right here on those links down below. And as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you next time. Today, we're talking about the church that sold bleach as a miracle drug that cured HIV and COVID. Michigan 16 finally getting what's been coming to them. Prisoners are being cooked alive in Texas. Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd are exposing the studios as greedy liars. We're talking about all that and so much more in today's brand new Philip DeFranco Show. You daily dive into the news, so buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. Starting with, you need to drink bleach if you want to cure cancer. That, to be clear, is not a DeFranco-approved message, but rather the hell of a sales pitch the Genesis 2 Church of Health and Healing in Florida told its followers for over a decade. Because in 2010, its so-called Archbishop Mark Brennan supposedly co-founded it with Jim Humble, a man who claimed to be a billion-year-old god from the Andromeda Galaxy. And although Humble reportedly stepped away back in 2016, Brennan continued to run the business with his sons Jonathan, Joseph, and Jordan, ages 37, 35, and 29. Understand, I call this a business because they sold bottles of what they called Miracle Mineral Solution, or MMS. And they marketed it as this miracle cure for literally 95% of the world's ailments, from cancer and COVID to HIV and hepatitis. But understand, this wasn't just some like Kool-Aid flavored water. When prepared as directed with citric acid, MMS turns into chlorine dioxide, an industrial bleaching agent. Which is why in 2019, the FDA had to warn that consuming it is the same as drinking bleach. And adding, the reports came in of people vomiting, having severe diarrhea, life-threatening dehydration, and acute liver failure. And all that leading to 2020, where a federal court ordered the Brennan to stop selling this poison. But they just refused, and they kept doing it, claiming civil disobedience and threatening to resort to the Second Amendment. Saying in a letter to the judge, the DOJ and FDA have no authority over our church. And all that leading to federal prosecutors charging them with conspiring to defraud the U.S. and selling misbranded drugs. And although Mark and Joseph, they fled to Colombia, seemed to be free, local authorities caught and extradited them back to the U.S. So now they're going on trial, and it already looks like it's going to be a clown show, with the four men declining to have a lawyer, choosing instead to represent themselves and appearing in court with matching beards and ponytails. While they oddly declined to give any sort of opening statement, the prosecutors did not pass up theirs, with them calling the family a bunch of snake oil salesmen and con men who pretended their scam was a religious organization to avoid federal regulations. And apparently, the district judge there agrees, because she said before the trial that they can't use religious freedom as a defense because they're not a religious entity. And that despite all their trappings of holiness, with them allegedly calling themselves bishops, their bleach bottles, sacraments, and their customers' payment donations. With them all in all allegedly raking in millions of dollars and tens of thousands of sales over the years. But with all that, I really just have this one question of why bleach? Like, there's always going to be con men in general, and there are con men who use, the trappings of religion and religious institutions as a shield. But why give your customers bleach? Why not like sugar water and vitamins? Like, was there some sort of thinking of like, we need people to feel like they're suffering, so we working, or is it something more twisted, like they got off on the idea of like they were exploiting people's faith and making that feel worse? And then they're cooking our babies alive. Those are the desperate words of a grieving mother whose son died in sweltering Texas prison last month. The thing is, she's not alone, with dozens of former inmates and prisoners' relatives rallying at the state capitol yesterday, protesting the lack of air conditioning in state prisons, which become almost uninhabitable during the summer in heat waves like this one. Because since mid-June of this year, at least 9 prisoners have reportedly died from heart attacks and cardiac events in uncooled prisons where the outdoor temperature was over 100 degrees. You also have at least another 14 dying from unknown causes in extreme heat. And although the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has not acknowledged that a prisoner died from the heat since 2012, there's a study that estimates that as many as 13% of the deaths in the state's prisons during warm months could be caused by heat. Because reportedly over 2/3 of Texas's 100 prisons don't have AC in most living areas. And keep in mind, we're talking about concrete and steel buildings with some people living on upper floors. When the temperature outside tops triple digits, the temperature inside is falling. That's not an exaggeration. Inmates and relatives sharing their stories about this.
It's very easy to kind of get into that suppressing heat and almost frankly forget to breathe.
I would flood the toilet. I would lay in it by the roof of cold running water with my fan popping over me.
He's the youngest of my sons. My heart beats when I see him. When I see him. Because it is a test.
So increasingly, we've seen activists and lawmakers demanding that Governor Greg Abbott call an immediate special legislative session on the issue, with State Representative Carl Sherman complaining that lawmakers spent the entire summer fighting over property taxes and other things that he calls rich people problems. Especially because back in May, the state Senate shot down a House proposal to invest more than $500 million in prison air conditioning. And that, even though they had a $32.7 billion budget surplus for the next 2 years. But this also isn't just a Texas problem. Right, by one count, 44 states do not have air conditioning in all their prisons, and 10 of them are in the South. With Mississippi's largest prison reportedly reaching up to 145 degrees. So the state government finally
Jesus
installed
Christ.
AC units last year. But of course, with this, you have critics wondering, will the government actually do something? Because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by this, but also a group of people that are routinely ignored because we dehumanize the incarcerated. And then, should you get an advantage because your mom or your daddy went to that college? That is a question that's been getting debated more and more following the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action. Because so-called legacy admissions have been criticized for years now for favoring rich white applicants over people of color. So that practice has now come under even more attack since the Supreme Court decided that schools can't consider race in admissions. And it's seeming like increasingly more and more people agreeing that legacy admissions are unfair. And in fact, top politicians on both sides of the aisle, including President Biden himself, have come out against the practice. And polls have consistently shown that the public agrees there. With a Pew Research Center survey taken last year finding that 3 in every 4 people believe that legacy status should not be considered for admission. And in fact, a new poll from Generation Lab taken after the affirmative action ruling found a nearly identical margin among college students, with 75% saying they believe the practice is either definitely not fair or probably not fair. And it looks like some schools are actually taking that to heart, right? Because part of the reason we're talking about this today is because the esteemed liberal arts school Wesleyan University announced that it would be ending legacy admission. And notably, they're following in the footsteps of other selective schools that have recently made the same move, including Amherst, Johns Hopkins, and Carnegie Mellon. But while to a degree this seems like a trend, you need to understand that many other competitive schools are reluctant to stop legacy admission. And that because they argue they're important for building intergenerational communities and for getting donations for alumni that can be used to fund financial aid, as well as some pockets. Beyond that, experts also note that making this decision could be harder for schools like Harvard and Yale, which have a higher percentage of legacy admissions. Right, Wesleyan, by contrast, had just around 3,000 undergrads, and its president said today that even before this decision, legacy status played a negligible role in the school's admissions process. And then, Jenna Ortega, Anne Hathaway, and Paul Rudd are still making movies amid the actors' strike. Before you grab that bucket of tomatoes and start chucking, understand they are not scabs and they're not actually crossing picket lines. Instead, yesterday what we saw was SAG granting approval to 39 different independent projects that'll still be allowed to continue shooting amid the strike. And in great news for you film nerds, this includes 2 A24 films. One starring Anne Hathaway, Hunter Schafer, and Michaela Cole, and the other with Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd, which, just as a side note, is a movie about a father and daughter who accidentally kill a unicorn with their car. And as far as why did they get this exemption, right? If the actors are on strike, why are they working? Reportedly, the reason these films got exemptions was because A24 and other groups behind those movies are not a part of the AMPTP, right? That group that's representing the studios that actors are on strike against. And so that means for these 39 projects, not only can they keep shooting them, but after production is completed, the actors can do promotion for them. And according to Variety, they just have to abide by the terms of the latest offer submitted by SAG. And with all this, you had SAG's chief negotiator, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, explaining that it's beneficial for actors to continue to work on approved projects or under interim agreements right now. With Rolling Stone quoting him as saying, "It really helps to show in a very practical way that the studios' claim that our proposals are unrealistic are just bogus. Our members who work under interim agreements are actually helping advance the cause just in a different way." So while obviously there are very real concerns about there being some sort of entertainment drought because of these strikes, there is also the possibility that if this goes on for a long time, we may see a sort of renaissance when it comes to indie films. In that maybe we see a number of movies getting released that don't have like a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, or an 8 after the title, since in general it seems like many of the studios have been allergic to like original or at least new IP. And then, if you're a dog lover like me, nutrition is very important for your dog's life and well-being, but it can also get costly, which is actually why I'm excited to tell you more about the sponsor of today's show, Sundays. Sundays is fresh dog food made from a short list of human-grade ingredients containing 90% meat, 10% veggies, and 0 synthetic nutrients. And unlike other fresh dog food, Sundays doesn't require refrigeration or preparation because of their air drying process. Just pour and serve, and it's super easy to store.
Hey, there's the
We all know
crash.
how much better we feel when we're getting the right nutrients and the good foods, and the same goes for man's best friend, which I will say, our dogs are loving this food. And we love feeding them quality food, but also really love the convenience of home delivery, which if you're lazy and or forgetful like me, comes in clutch. That way I don't get into that position where I'm like, oh no, I've run out of dog food. What can I give
Back in
these
a
guys
second.
because I don't have time to go to the store? But also, get this, Sundays cost 40% less than other healthy dog food brands because Sundays doesn't waste money shipping frozen packages. Instead, they spend the money on what matters, sourcing the best all-natural ingredients for your dog. Trust me, you gotta try. I loved how excited my dogs got. And best of all, you can get 35% off your first order of Sundays. Just go to sundaysfordogs.com/Phil or just use code Phil at checkout. And then, the government and Big Brother have gone too damn far. That's what a group of more than 3 dozen lawmakers argued in a letter urging the Biden administration to change federal laws that allow law enforcement to access sensitive medical data. And notably, that including abortion records, all without a warrant. With this letter coming in response to a proposed update under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, aka HIPAA. And specifically an update that would require law enforcement to include a written certification in its request for certain protected health information, vowing that the data would not be used in certain ways. But the lawmakers say that the Biden administration needs to go further and ensure that Americans' protected health information for all categories of medical care receive the same protections that emails and location data already receive, and adding that the changes are necessary in order to protect Americans from warrantless government surveillance. The letter specifically noted, although doctors cannot be forced to testify about their patients' medical conditions in courts across the country, patient records containing the same information can be subpoenaed by law enforcement agencies without showing probable cause of a crime and without oversight by an independent judge. So with that, the group's asking Biden to require law enforcement to obtain a warrant in order to get protected health information from doctors, pharmacists, and other medical providers, arguing that requiring a warrant for this information is consistent with the protections afforded to other sensitive data under federal law and the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. Also pointing out that law enforcement's already required to have a warrant to wiretap someone's phone calls, obtain their emails and text messages, or track their phone's location. Beyond all that, the letter also calls on the administration to require warrants for protected health info to prevent those records from being shared with fusion centers, government surveillance clearinghouses, or other law enforcement agencies unless necessary. Plus, they're requesting that patients be notified when their medical data is shared with law enforcement. And while obviously this applies to a wide range of protected medical data, this letter is coming amid increased concerns about the surveillance of abortion seekers specifically. And that's not just limited to warrantless surveillance of medical records and information. In fact, the same day lawmakers sent this letter, a damning new report was published detailing how people who travel across state lines to get abortions or gender-affirming care face an increased threat of surveillance and criminalization from law enforcement. And that report, which was published by the advocacy group, the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, it showed just how many data points law enforcement can use to track people who travel out of state to get abortions, with a senior researcher explaining that traditionally lawyers prosecuting abortions have drawn from cell phone data, but also adding, even in the absence of cell phone data, it is shockingly and scarily easy to track people's trips to gender-affirming care clinics and to abortion clinics, with them pulling from a number of different sources such as vehicle information from private car or rideshare apps, flight records, street cameras, ticket information, automatic license plate readers, among others. And the organization's executive director saying, every hotel reservation and bridge toll will just be one subpoena away from being used against a patient in court. And the report also warning that digital surveillance data makes profiling easy and suggests that travel data will be weaponized to identify new targets for healthcare prosecutions and investigations. And importantly, all of this is coming as anti-abortion states are increasing their efforts to prosecute people who leave the state to get an abortion where it is legal. So this is a very big deal, something we're going to have to keep our eyes on, and unfortunately in the meantime, we know Big Brother's going to be doing the same. And then, the other shoe just dropped for 16 fake electors in Michigan, with Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel yesterday charging 16 Republicans who falsely claimed to be the presidential electors in 2020 in an effort to get Trump elected in the state. And the charges they are looking at are hefty, with Nessel slapping all 16 with 8 criminal counts including forgery, conspiracy to commit forgery, and election law forgery, some of which carry sentences of up to 14 years in prison. So I imagine not fun news for any of these 16, but especially Michon Maddock, who back in May joked about not being arrested, saying, "Dems waiting for my arrest." Also, the details in this story are very interesting, because specifically, court documents released after the charges were announced detail how the 16 Republicans met and filled out paperwork claiming that they were Michigan's official electors and that Trump had won the election. This, of course, despite the fact that Biden had actually won the state by 150,000 votes, courts had already thrown out lawsuits that claimed that Trump had won, and leaders in the legislature had made it clear they would not challenge the results further. But still, the fake Trump electors tried to go to the state capitol on December 14th of 2020, the day every state met and cast their vote for president. But of course, they were blocked by police because the real electors who had literally been certified by the state were already there doing their job. But even then, the Trump electors claimed that they were the true electors who had met at the state capitol. And it wasn't just a verbal claim. Nessel also said yesterday that the 16 Republicans actually submitted paperwork to the Senate, National Archives, and other entities making this bullshit claim, which, who could have guessed it, turned out is in fact a crime. And understand, these criminal charges are especially significant because the 16 Trump electors in Michigan weren't the only idiots who tried to pull this stunt. Right? Michigan is just one of 7 swing states that Biden won where Republicans filed paperwork claiming to be the true electors for their states. And also, Michigan isn't the only state to have launched an investigation into those actions, with probes still ongoing in Arizona and Georgia, alongside additional civil lawsuits against the fake electors in Wisconsin as well as Michigan. And well, of course, we're gonna have to wait to see how all this plays out. Very key thing. While the Michigan probe that resulted in the charges we're talking about today mostly focused on the fake Trump electors, it's possible that it could expand beyond that, with Nessel saying yesterday, this remains an ongoing investigation and our department has not ruled out potential charges against additional defendants. But yeah, in shocking news, someone might actually be held accountable. And then, Vladimir Putin is a little bitch. Or to put it another way, South Africa just avoided an international crisis after convincing Putin to just stay home. Because little boy Vladdy was supposed to be traveling to the country for the upcoming BRICS summit. But there was the itty-bitty problem of that whole International Criminal Court arrest warrant because South Africa is obligated under treaties to execute that warrant if Putin shows up, which obviously puts the government in a weird spot, where they either don't arrest him and get in trouble with every other country that follows the ICC, or they do arrest him and then deal with Russia likely not being a fan of that. With South Africa's president even speaking on this and saying, Russia has made it clear that arresting its sitting president would be a declaration of war. It would be inconsistent with our constitution to risk engaging in war with Russia. Now with that, Russia has denied that it threatened war, although the statement from a Kremlin spokesperson really isn't that much better, saying it's clear to everyone what that kind of infringement against the head of the Russian state would mean. And so with South Africa seemingly having no good solution for a while, it seemed like they were just leaning towards letting
No, I'm pretty sure Diablo 4 is doing that just fine.
the opposition party went to court to try and compel the government to arrest Putin if he arrived. However, all this ended up getting dodged because Putin agreed to stay home and instead send Foreign Minister Lavrov, which could end up
I played PoE last night and there was tons of people on, hanging out. Played D4 on the first day of the season. Everyone's like, D4. Who cares?
With China and India especially really propping up Russia's international trade right now. But that is where your daily dive into the news is going to end today. But of course, remember, for more news you need to know, I got you covered right here on the link down below. For those who have already watched everything, remember, my name's Philip the Frank. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
I learned a bunch of good crafting last night, though. There are people on and new crafting, and they were helping me. I made like a 25 to 30 div helm. I ended up spending like 3 divine because I got kind of lucky. That was pretty cool. Then I killed Maven, but I died like twice, and I was like, I don't think I can do Uber Maven with this build. So I have this EK Ignite build. And I did Uber Maven, she beat my ass. I was like, yeah, I didn't think that shit was gonna happen. And then I went to bed. It was like 3:30 in the morning.
From 2018's Halloween, and here she gets a much meatier and more emotional role. And I was seriously impressed. Lady's got chops. The same goes for little Luke David Blum. He has a lot of difficult and physical scenes.
You're home kind of early.
And he really does it all well. Beyond the impressive acting, there is plenty of scary and quite gruesome moments.
Are you getting on Diablo or anything?
Intriguingly vague story that is slowly put together. There's also a very late surprising twist that really makes you go back through the whole movie and reconsider many aspects as a result. And that is why we are here, folks. So let's dive into Sigh, breaking down the story, including what is revealed about Laura and her
nice.
past, if she's cuckoo or not, and explaining the big
Are you on Discord?
as well as how it affects everything else in the story. A car barrels down the road in a flurry of rings, hearing overlapping voices speaking of my God, asking if you understand the horror that's gonna flood your soul. A young woman, Laura, stops at a diner wearing some kind of peasant dress, her feet seem crusted in mud. Certainly,
Yeah, I don't blame you.
She has fled some kind of religious cult situation. But
Who knows how long I'll
not so
play.
simple. Two other dudes
It's kind of fun to play.
taking a seat at the booth behind her.
It's kind of fun to play
Watches over her as one stares her down. She
Rogue,
rises to her feet,
but it's
seemingly
not
quite
crazy
ready.
enough to where
And the guys chase
I'm
after
super
her.
focused.
Back on the road, she's really pushing it now and is forced to screech off, moaning and breathing heavily. No, 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 she cries, pulling her hand covered in blood along with her entire whole baby area. I don't want you, she growls, and she yanks a bit, and we hear a newborn crying. Well, that was actually pretty easy, just a schloop, couple of tugs, and the guy just pops right out. Huh? Isn't that how childbirth works? Pretty sure. not that simple. She wakes up several years later. The boy David, now
Yeah.
8 years old. And in stark contrast to before, she actually seems to really care for him now. Although there is quite a gap in the aftermath of that fateful roadside delivery. We don't quite know what happened in the interim. What's sort of the whole point, we find out. We see that she teaches younger kids going through the alphabet. And then later in the day, rushes to classes that she's taking herself. We overhear the teacher speaking of people with trauma and how they will often develop obsession with it and worry about their safety and the safety of their loved ones. I'm sure that's not relevant. Just kidding. As you know, my old adage, if you have a class scene like this in a movie, it usually discusses its grander themes, and that is the case here as well. Afterwards, she picks up David's from their neighbor Susan's house, the boy excitedly running out and giving her a big hug. In his room, he boasts a Plan 9 from outer space, as well as an OG House on Haunted Hill poster on the wall, and is even playing the original Resident Evil to boot. Pretty obsessed with horror there, bud. Wonder what that's about. He asks her to keep the light on in case zombies show up. Her smiling, see, that's why we don't play scary games before bed. She sits in bed studying, hearing footsteps approaching. She assumes that it's David, but hears jumping out in the hall. Now a bit confused, she sees that his door is still closed, and nope, not in the bathroom either. She turns the handle, alarmingly coming to a group of dour-looking people all around the boy. The door slams itself closed, and she is unable to get it back open. She runs outside and heads to Susan's, asking her to call the police. There's cable in David's room. She returns with a knife, but the people are all gone. A motionless David looking ill and sans jammy somehow on the bed. The cops show up later, but distressingly they were unable to find any evidence of a break-in. One officer, Paul, asked if she might have just left the door open or lost the key or something like that, but Laura is adamant that that isn't the case. She always double-checks everything in the house that is locked. But here we're already sowing the seeds of doubt that she might be dreaming or hallucinating. So where's the people? Steve asks, clearly not believing. Paul uses Steve to go back to the station, and he'll finish up here. Now alone, he says that he believes her, appearing genuine. He candidly says, "We'll fucking get him," and apologizes for being crass, her chuckling through teary eyes. Obviously just appreciating that at least someone is on her side here. Later, she crawls into bed with David, getting emotional. He sleepily wakes up, asking what she's doing, and she questions if he remembers what happened. He says he can't remember a thing. That's okay, she sees. He was dreaming. Quite frighteningly, that he was drowning in a river of blood. We jump to what looks like a flash of blood splatter, but it's oddly Laura just teaching her kids. What kind of finger painting is that, lady? Doesn't really seem appropriate for a little kid. Look what I made, Mommy, in class. It's a blood splatter. I'm gonna be the next Dexter. Good for you, son. What if you draw an apple or a cat or something normal? Paul shows up with no fresh leaves and asks if she's okay. She sighs, sorta.
Rexacore, you know the guy, right? The Diablo streamer. He had like 12,000 people on his stream right before the league started, and even he was like, "Holy shit!"
We see a bedroom with a particular wooden symbol adorned above the top, and outside there's a banner with "He is coming" written on it. A voice echoing, "Wake up, honey," and she shoots up at home. She peers over to David, seeing him covered in blood and screaming. Her waking up.
Mr. Llama isn't even playing this season.
He groans that he has a headache and his stomach feels sick. Don't worry, she promises. If you're still sick in the morning,
I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not. Actually, if he had as much as Shroud did, that's fucking crazy.
Laura running to the phone and immediately calling Paul. He shows up and looks around, but turns up nothing. He's sure that they won't be back, though. Whoever they are must know that the police are watching by now. She sighs that she saw them, though, him thinking they must have come in the back garden. But that'll have to wait. As
What was I
David
gonna say?
stumbles downstairs, moaning.
Oh yeah, Mr. Llama SC isn't even playing this season. When I was looking through like the streamers,
Straight to the hospital for you.
because I was just curious when people were gonna be able to like log into the server.
Laura is horrified.
He was playing D2 Resurrected. It's like he's not even playing it.
She speaks with the doctors who go through what they thought they were dealing with based on the symptoms, but every test that they ran came back negative, including
Yeah, Shroud's a huge streamer.
and narcotics.
He's one of the people that went over to Kick and asked to stream on Kick a certain amount of time too.
That he won't wake up ever again, offering her a weak apology.
Oh, did he put out videos saying he's not gonna play it?
And assuming the people in the room must have poisoned everything. But he reminds her that
Everyone's doing reaction videos to everyone else's videos.
reassurance from Paul. Does that make sense?
So, like,
But he has nothing to say now.
that's all I see from people lately.
To have some doubts. With apparently no other option, she has a heartfelt goodbye with David. She grabs his hand, telling him it's okay to go, knowing that he's in pain. There's more flashes of her in the bed, and a super duper quick, like 1-frame shot of this dude. And I don't know, he doesn't look exactly too friendly. Then a car driving down a country road, seeing the same symbol on the side of the road from the bedroom, along with, again, the "he is coming" sign. Coming out of her daze, she looks to the door and it is in the middle of swinging open, as though someone just left. David starts making worried noises, her shouting for help, concerned that he's coughing up blood again. The doc rushes in, and amazingly, David wakes up, weakly saying, "Mommy." And just like that, out of nowhere, he's looking absolutely fit as a fiddle. It's a miracle. So they go out for some celebratory Chinese.
Riker on his videos kind of was like,
She's just over the moon that he's okay.
kind of hesitant to say too much like negative shit about the patch.
He still believes it was a one-off.
But Mr. Llama was just like, no, this is fucking dumb.
David wants to leave, and she notices his not eating too, pleading with him to just take a few bites. He pouts, he doesn't want, and well, what are you gonna do? He puts the boy to bed, divulging to Paul.
I would have expected both of them to just like save face and just either not talk about it or try and stick up for it.
He shrugs it off as just doing my job, and decides it's finally time for him to take his leave. He won't let him go, asking him to stay, clearly developing a kind of protector need with him, and she goes in for a kiss. "You sure about this?" he asks. She nods, going in for more smooches. He removes his jacket, asking about a wound on his arm. He excuses that it's from a junkie that stabbed him, just part of the job. Their hot and heavy makeout set is abruptly halted by David screaming from upstairs. They find him violently convulsing in bed, so it's back to the hospital in hopes of answers. First, she chews out the doctor, since she actually has been trying to call him multiple times about the not eating and drinking thing. Vaughn trying to calm her down and saying that he's fine. But come on, he's obviously not fine, Doc. Laura finally spills the beans to Hall about her past, really showing how much trust she has already developed for him at this point. She was raised in a cult and escaped 6 years ago. At first, she wasn't sure that this was them, but now she is positive that they were the people in David's room. He's called away by the doctor, quickly whispering to stay with them. You have no idea what they're capable of. David is looking way messed up again, moving in a strange, contorting fashion, his jaw cracking as he's trying to chew down on something. He lays by his side and strokes his hair. More memories of her past continue to flood in. We flash to the bed, then see someone deep in the woods, followed by a bunch of naked dudes hanging out by the pool. It's like quite a party. Say the words, a voice tells her. It seems that the cult is as dangerous and powerful as she claims. When peeking out in the hall, she overhears the doctors talking to handle it quietly, and the boy is the priority. Looking out the window, there's a black car there with goons that rush out towards the hospital. She manages to flee the hospital, taking a taxi. David weakly wheezing in the back seat, cradling him in her arms. Afraid to go home, she takes him instead to Susan's, and she immediately at the side of the boy wants no part of this. Being a friendly neighbor is one thing. This is pushing it, lady. She wants to take him back to the hospital immediately, but she argues that they didn't even do anything. So she leaves them both to get some stuff back at the house. She tenderly places a hand on her chest, David croaking to At the house, she gets a call from Paul, breathlessly telling him to not ask any questions. He tells her that everyone is looking for her, but she's unfazed. Just promise, Paul, that you can't trust anyone. They're all in on it, bro. The cold, he asks. Bring your gun, she orders him, and hangs up. She runs back to Susan's, finding the door locked. And when looking in the window, a lamp is curiously askew on the ground. She goes in the back door, grabbing a big knife. She snatches a hammer, too. Double duty. Sure, why not? Her hands shaking. She enters the room, hearing whimpering and dripping liquid, but still can't quite see over the couch yet. When she does, it's a horrifying sight. David munching down on Susan's guts, gobbling up her inside. The boy grunting, "He feels better now, Mom." It seems David doesn't quite get what just happened, but is still looking much better, asking if they're staying with Susan tonight. "No, I just need you to rest," she tells him. He smiles, "I love you. Love you too, sweetheart," and leaves him to deal with his mess, holding back tears at the gruesome display. Now seeing that something is horribly off with her son, needing flesh and blood in order to even survive. She elects to simply cover the body in a rug and writes a message on the wall. He is coming, along with the cult's ubiquitous symbol, trying to lay the blame of the murder on them. She collects David, the two speeding off into the night. Paul calls again, and she decides to toss the phone out the window, eyeing the sleeping David, getting across just how much she's willing to do for her son. They stop for the night at a roadside motel. David, still an excited bundle of energy, flips on the TV while an exhausted Laura just needs some sleep. He asks to watch just a little bit more before bed, yet apparently watches TV all night long. him waking her up in the morning. With the bombshell that they are on the news, both considered missing, a search now in place to track them down. The stakes are already getting higher. She first gets a fresh set of, well, actually pretty old wheels before trekking onwards. Asking where they're headed, Laura explains they're going to find an old friend of hers that she knew as a child, hopeful that he can help her remember a few more things clearly from her muddled past. Paul and Steve aren't too far behind, bringing Susan's body into the morgue, but Steve has a file that he feels compelled to show him. It's full of newspaper clippings about a young Kansas girl, Anna, that was held captive and suffered years of physical and sexual abuse at the hands of her father. After being rescued, was treated for trauma. Her condition referred to as stable, but her mental state is said to be severely damaged by what happened. Another fills in some gaps on the timeline after giving birth to David. Sometime after the opening, he was rescued by the police, who then raided the cult's compound, arresting the father and over time 10 more individuals, all ID'd by Anna. And if it wasn't blatantly obvious, he sees
The fuck's the Queen's Den?
Anna and Laura are one and the same. So maybe she is just crazy after all of her trauma. Steve questions if he's in a relationship with her. He admits that they made out and that's it, but is confident
What
she
the-
couldn't have been behind the murder. So then who did it? Well, maybe this crazy cult dude. Oh, a pedo cult? He scoffs back in disbelief. He relinquishes to just bring her in. If it's real, she needs her help. And if not, then they at least need to get the boy and bring him back to the hospital before he dies. The mother and son arrive at a farmhouse, introducing herself by her real name, Anna. Mrs. Nagel remembers her, and seeing Dave, asks if he's the boy. Laura stops her, he doesn't know, and wants to keep him in the dark of where he came from, asking him to listen to music while they talk. Before he gets his buds in, though, Nagel is already going on about him being a poor child. How could something so beautiful and innocent come from such evil? Thanks, Nagel, trying to shield the boy from this evil roots and is blowing it. Laura whispers, oh, she's just crazy, jamming his earbuds in before they continue. She's in search of the aforementioned childhood friend Jimmy, and needs to know where he is. Sounds like he hasn't been doing too great things. In and out of prison the past 5 years, as well as stealing from her, and she even blames him for sending his father to an early grave. Gee, sounds like some bad luck being around old Jimmers. She admits that she blamed Laura at first for what happened, for introducing Jimmy to her father, but now knows that she was wrong. She too was just a child. It couldn't truly ever be her fault, and apologizes, getting teary-eyed, revealing Jimmy moved to an area of Mississippi, which she refers to as an awful place. Dang, all doom and gloom with Nagel. Jeez. Paul looks into the hospital she went to for recovery, tracking down the now retired Dr. Bradley, as Laura makes it to Jimmy's junkyard shack, David complaining of not feeling so well. Uh-oh, getting hungry for blood. Right before she goes inside, and to confuse things a little further, Paul meets with the doctor that treated Laura, and he straight up denies there being any kind of crazy cult or anything like that. He pins it all entirely on Laura's troubled mind, calling it a fabricated reality. Back with Jimmy and Laura, he is not looking so good. Twitchy and strung out, just like his mom said. Must have been a while since they've seen each other, stammering that he's sorry for not visiting her at the hospital, but they actually wouldn't let him blaming the docs for fucking him up in the head. She agrees, as when she was discharged from the hospital, she was on so many drugs that she didn't remember anything, which actually explains that kind of missing piece in her story of after the baby and then jumping to 8 years later, because she has more or less had it blocked out.
One-handed weapons.
Jimmy, on the other hand, says he remembers everything, going on to the dudes with old ceremonies, killing and torturing animals in front of them, usually in her bedroom, the one we've been seeing. They would make her do chanting, and supposedly she was the only one that could do it correctly. All of the others tried, but failed, so in some way she was considered special. Essentially, her so-called father taught her sacred words in order to make the huntsman demon rise from hell and then rape her. So it was actually this demon guy that was giving her the business, not any of the humans, which isn't really better in the end, I guess, but it's still worth clarifying. She remembers that her father was the one who assaulted her, but he says that these were false memories, and it was more like she was revered. None of the men ever dared touch her, as she was exclusively for the demon. Laura struggles, on the verge of a breakdown, believing that if she starts to accept what he's saying, what it really means is that it's her brain triggering back to psychosis. He's steadfast that it's all true. You're as sane as I am. Well, that's not exactly reassuring considering the setup we got going on here. A freshly rash-covered David enters, crying that it hurts. So it's off to another dingy motel room, while Steve and Paul are one step behind them as usual, with him having just found Jimmy's location. But rather than act immediately, Steve asks Paul to wait behind so that they can go together. Okay,
I've been playing.
Steve.
I played from 1 to 4,
A little rough around the edges,
and
but
then
one of the
like
dudes sitting outside drinking and
5:30
roughing up
to
some
now,
ladies of the night.
so
He invites her to come over, creepily suggesting
about
he
4.5
can flirt
hours.
with her. Laura puts David to bed, sweaty and wheezing, the rash already back to covering his entire body. You know what you gotta do? He's hungry, lady. The whole point here being further
Not
pushing the
having
limits
to
of what she's
do-
willing to do for the sake of her son. Is she willing to lead a person to their death to keep
Not having to
them
do the
alive?
campaign
That's
is good.
another flashback
You
to
can
the wedding. The
they let
father
you
is
like
there,
skip the
telling
campaign
her
if you did it in the
to
last league.
say the words. And the whole gang is there walking silently in formation towards the bed. He keeps whining that it hurts, so she retreats to the bathroom. The boy's still yelling through the door and getting more abrasive, telling her to get me some fucking food, you bitch. And then the screaming suddenly stops. She cautiously steps out to check on him, seeing him going mental, his bones cracking with each spasm, hissing and snarling at her. She's at least able to stop his tantrum, still repeating that he needs food. She takes a moment for herself in the car, screaming and shaking, obviously wrestling with the decision. Is she really gonna do it? She flashes back through her bed and starts chanting, "By Astaroth, your prince and master
Take a drag of
Lucifer
cigarette real
appear
quick.
before me now." And lo and
Hey,
behold,
Kyle, what's up,
the
man?
white figure is briefly
Yeah, you just hit
lifted
30?
under the bed, which must
Yeah, about on the
mean
same
the
drill.
huntsman demon, which she
Same,
was actually
same
able to
track.
summon. The father encouragingly telling her,
I took a break,
"Girl."
like an hour and a half. I had to go
He's
run
there,
errands and I
and
ate some
an
food and
unsavory
stuff.
food source dropped
I'll be
right
back though,
into her
guys.
laps. The big gross guy. He's in the middle of dragging a woman around, demanding that she hand over some money. And it's like, light bulb, this guy kind of deserves to get eaten, right? Moral crisis averted. At least a little bit. Still no easy task for her, downing a bunch of liquor for liquid courage before approaching him. He's still just chilling out front and picks him up to come back to her room and hum. She beckons him back to the bathroom, noticing David's hand peeking out from under the bed. She basically stalls their undressing as long as humanly possible for David to get to him. But it's too much foreplay for this guy, getting angry and starting to choke her. David is there, right behind him, and he spins around, the boy lunging at him, and he falls back. Laura gets to his gun, and David starts chowing down, blood shooting out everywhere. The guy screaming to, "Get it off me!" She slams the door closed, running out. Not a great guy, but it's still pretty messed up. He's back to his high energy state, wanting to do something fun, while she's busy dealing with the giant man's mutilated pieces in the bathroom. You know, rather than leave this whole big guy, why not just take some with you? I mean, he could eat off that leg alone for like a week. You know, snacks for the road, that's all I'm saying. She instead dumps the pieces outside of a church, not even burying them or anything, so yeah, it's gonna get found pretty easily. But she again frames the cult with the same "he is coming" message written in blood. The next morning, Steve and Paul make it to Jimmy's, but after a knock on the door, there's no answer. They bust into the shack and discover him naked and dead in the bedroom with several crosses jammed into his mouth. He is coming also carved into his chest, making us think that David and Laura killed him, but he didn't get eaten. So they get a tip on the phone about her checking out from a nearby motel, and they're off, still somewhat lagging behind. The mom and son are peacefully sleeping, then both wake up smiling, and David describes what he was dreaming about this time, which, even though he says it in a very innocent, naive way, kind of paints him as pretty much the Antichrist. He says that he was flying and looking down at everyone and could see everything. It was so cool. Sounds cool, she agrees. Then I raised my hand like this, and the world cracked in half. There was fire and burning buildings and everything. People were screaming like 9/11. Yeah, so the apocalypse basically. She asks if he was scared. He nods, but I was okay, like a superhero or something. Nothing could touch me. Wow, she smiles, taking it all in. Now knowing what this thing is that she has been protecting so much, the bringer of the end of the world from the sounds of it, she too comes to realize the impossibility of her circumstances and breaks it to him gently that his sickness has been coming more quickly each time, but unlike before, she puts her foot down. She can no longer help him, but vows to still be by his side, yet can't help in that way. She forces a smile, bringing up a nearby carnival that they should check out, and David is super stoked, chanting, "I wanna go." But they will have to wait until tonight. As predicted, it's not long until his sickness returns, taking a piss mixed with lots of blood. Yikes! And his rash returns. Paul and Steve discover the pimp's body at the church, and he tries to reason with Paul that he knows that Laura must be responsible for these killings. There's no satanic cult, man! Either way, he asks him to go easy on her. Due to her mental state, he thinks that she might not even know that she's actually doing these things. The mother and son at least get a brief moment of happiness at the carnival, taking a ride on the merry-go-round and enjoying some Midway games. But there's some shenanigans afoot because he tosses the ball right into the thing and it doesn't even budge. Oh man, rip-off, dude. But there's bigger problems beyond scamming Midway games. He throws the ball and his bones painfully crunch. She takes him back to the room and he's already looking worse for wear. He begs and begs to feed him, but she stays on track that she cannot cannot help him. She then hears a distorted voice commanding to get the boy, and the door slams closed. She opens fire blindly in the dark, and shockingly, with turning on the light, it's several officers, including Steve, that she's shot in cold blood. Oh well, might as well eat up, boy. No sense in letting them go to waste. It's a buffet! Steve is still alive for the moment, but bleeding out. She futilely tries to stop his bleeding with a hand on the neck. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna do much at this point. And he fades away. She looks down at the literal blood on her hands and grabs David to leave. When it comes to the whole is she nuts or is the cult really behind this thing, this particular scene to me is the most inconclusive. She hears the voice, but it's actually the cops that she kills, as we later see Paul with Steve's body back in the morgue. She calls him and apologizes that she didn't mean to kill him or his friends, but Paul knows that she's too far gone, asking her to turn herself in. She tells him to go back to where it all started, and he tries once more to get through to her. What you're thinking is happening is just a fantasy, but she just hangs up to his frustration. Where it all began is naturally the cult's compound, the banner now reading Happy Birthday, which to me must be tied to David's birth 8 years ago, and the area appears long abandoned. Remember, they were mostly all arrested 8 years ago, including her father, so it appears that there's nobody left here. Still knowing where the key to the back door is, she lets herself in and grabs a big knife. Hey, she's pretty consistent, better have a knife than nothing, you know what I'm saying? In the dining room, there's more remnants of a birthday party. A rack of bones and empty wine glasses collecting dust on the table. She treks her way upstairs to what we know must be her bedroom that she kept seeing in those flashes. She then fetches David and starts her chanting, asking them to come forth and do her bidding. Even though nothing happens, she continues, I know you can hear me. Come here and cure my son, our son. Still nothing. So gives him an ultimatum. Cure him or I'll kill him. The huntsman does appear behind her, but Laura never turns around, a strange smile crossing her face, and she repeats the chant once more. He finally starts stepping towards her, hearing rumbling, the objects in the room starting to clatter as he gets closer. We see its shadow reaching out on the cabinet, getting a quick glimpse of his face. But then Paul busts in with backup, asking what she's doing, snapping her back to reality, and the demon vanishes. He orders them to stand down while she tries to explain about him not being human. He's killed and will kill again. He calmly asks her to put the knife down. Show yourself. Come back, she cries, blaming Paul for making the demon disappear. And thanks to this, she now has no choice but to kill David. Paul continues to try to get through to her that everything was imagined and that he knows all about her terrible childhood and why she did all the terrible things that she did. I can't let him live like
So
this,
they're just
she
not gonna
sobs.
summon people?
I love him too much. After all she was willing to do, she understands at his core he is his father's inherently evil son and gets the knife out just about to stab. But Paul fires and puts her down. He had no other option, it appears. But I mean, he probably just
Alright, well, this
shot
is
her in the
bugged.
hand or something, just to disarm her, you know. But no, as we see with poor David
Screw
crying
this.
at his mommy to wake up, Paul straight up blew her friggin' face off. Huh. Well, that does seem odd after everything up to this point, and especially his compassionate demeanor. Things are cleared up later at the hospital. David is recovering, looking weak. Paul enters, telling him that he's here for him, to protect him, and to make him better again. Getting teary-eyed, taken aback by the importance of his true purpose. The nurse is drawn away by some alarm, conveniently leaving the two alone. And Paul whips out a switchblade and proceeds to slice his arm, dripping the blood into David's grateful mouth. He carves out a whole chunk of flesh, feeding it to the boy, who gobbles it down. He starts perking up after some food, and Paul warns him he has to keep who he really is a secret.
I'm
Don't
gonna
worry, he's
crash.
taking care of everything, seeing that he
I
is
just
actually
wanna
the
get
one
the
who
frickin'
killed Jimmy,
waypoint
and
first.
Jimmy was one of the only few who seems to know the truth about what was going on. Getting even more emotional, he tells David that he has a surprise for him. It's your
nice.
father. David starts rising
It's
in
coming.
bed, indeed floating
It's
out of it,
coming.
drawn to the same bony entity that we saw earlier. They hug, him whispering, Daddy, as he takes him in his arms. There's quite a few twists there at the end, but perhaps most importantly is a surprise that Paul is actually part of the cult, and has indeed been tasked with helping and taking care of the boy. This especially upon a rewatch, paints his and Laura's relationship in a very different light. What seems like understanding and compassion is actually manipulation. He continuously plays into what Laura believes until he has no choice in a professional sense to deem her unstable and is presented as a murderous threat. The entire point is to frame her as living in a fantasy or again believing these supposedly crazy things that traumatize her as a child, more or less leading her along into doing everything that he needs to make her look nuts and actually egging on her various beliefs about things, everything appearing legit, but she's nuts on paper, so he can ultimately justify killing her and getting to the boy. The bigger actual plan that he's going for here. That's why he takes out Jimmy too, as he's one of the only other ones that remembers what the cult was really up to. It's about what the cover story that comes out is. As far as anyone is concerned, Laura did go nuts and killed Susan and the pimp guy, so the police had to take her out. And this is also why he kills her rather than disabling her. I mean, who can believe what was really going on with all the summoning and birthing a demon Antichrist child? I mean, that's just crazy, right? Of course, it would appear to be to any sane person. But again, the true story isn't so cut and dry. This leads to the other predominant lingering question. Was Laura/Anna crazy or what? Just what was real or in her head and caused by her mental anguish brought on by unbelievable trauma? To me, it ultimately feels like a fuzzy combination of both. So there's no question the cult that she was a part of was trying to summon this demon, and that David is its son. The end makes this especially clear, but there's still more questions along the way. One clue that I thought was quite subtle, actually, was that someone must have fed David blood to make him better the first time. The culprit is Paul. He brings up during their hot makeout moment a wound on his arm, writing it off as being stabbed. It is obvious now that it was him. He cut himself to feed to the weakened David, kickstarting the whole thing off in the first place. This is a predominant example of how Paulite was sort of gaslighting her. This did happen for real, all to push her down a specific desired path. As far as the other things she sees that appear in explicitly, like the people in David's room, these rather feel like breaks with reality occurring, not actually happening. Even though Paul could have been lying about the house showing no signs of a break-in, the ever-doubtful Steve was still there too. And I feel like he wouldn't be the kind of person to lie about that. So chances are there never was anyone that broke in. The various things that she sees and hears are all brought on by her bubbling psychosis, facilitated by Paul and Nicole. That brings us to the conclusion of this ending explained for Son. So I guess in the end, the cult really did succeed in what they were trying to do, bringing Hunter's demon kid into our world, leading to what sounds to be total destruction for everybody. Evil prevails after all, and poor Laura just ended up being a pawn in their bigger picture. Kind of sad considering everything that she went through, but time's the way she goes. And don't forget, before we go, you can send me requests for any movies or TV shows you'd like to see me explain by sending them my way on any of my social media conflicts. What did you guys think of Son and its ending? Do you have a different interpretation of what happened? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching Conflicts, and thanks for 2 million subs. Woohoo! See y'all next time. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Foundflix. On this Ending Explained, we're looking at Infinity Pool. Following a couple on a ritzy beach vacation on the island of La Polka, a fatal accident exposes the resort's perverse subculture of hedonistic tourism, reckless violence, and surreal horror. Sounds like my kind of vacation. Infinity Pool is the latest from Brandon Cronenberg, son of body horror maestro David. Yet already with 3 films under his belt, baby Brandon has really etched out his own particular weird brand of cosmic horror outside of his father's shadow. His latest feels like an evolution of his distinct style. It's not quite as trippy as Possessor, and tells a seemingly much more straightforward story. Yet it also touches on many thematic elements that have come to define his work, like what it means to be a human, the idea of our own identity, and other existential concepts. That is all on display here in a freshly twisted, and at times quite thoroughly hilarious fashion. The progression into total depravity is ramped up quite well, starting seemingly innocent enough before things go increasingly off the rails. A lot of these ideas of identity and what makes us who we are is presented through the self-reflecting journey of James, Alex Skarsgård, and it's a lot of fun seeing him playing against his typical beefcake type. But perhaps unsurprisingly, it's Mia Goth who steals the show again. Oh, and guess what? She's a complete lunatic. I'm sensing a pattern here. But just like the ramping of the story, her character too takes time to shed her layers before revealing the true monster hiding at the core. Obviously, there is a lot to dig into here, and I'll make sure to cover everything and what it all means. So let's take a one-way trip into madness with Infinity Pool, breaking down the story, the important themes at play, as well as explaining the ending and reasoning behind James's important final decision. In a dark hotel room, we hear an early morning conversation between couple Emily and James. They first discuss getting some breakfast before Em cuts a little deeper into James as a person. She doesn't understand why they're here. It isn't helping anything. He's so frozen these days. She can't tell if
And
he's
there's the
sleeping or
crash.
awake, which will become a predominant
Why
theme
not?
as the story gets more out of control. He tries to get closer to her, but she's more interested in catching the buffet.
If you crash in a stronghold that's bad, it just completely
Alright,
kicks
we
you
flow
out.
through the lavish and quite empty resort grounds on the fictional island of La Tolca. James and Em pass through the grounds, both dressed quite stylishly. The camera spins upside down, floating up into the sky. We see several locations around the compound, but it's all weird and askew, already letting us know that something is off here. A group of employees donned in traditional Iki masks inform the crowd about the meaning of the upcoming rainy season for the locals. It's known as the Summoning, and they celebrate with music, food, and good company. Each guest is bestowed with color spots near their eye to signify the friendship they share by closing the season together. Oh, and don't forget, you can get your own Iki mask right down at the gift shop. Already showing us how the local traditions have been reappropriated and corrupted by the tourists. James sullenly joins Em for breakfast, and he too is feeling odd about the place. Where are we anyway? She reminds him that this was his idea and pokes at him once more. You feeling inspired yet? She doesn't really wait for an answer and goes on about booking a boat tour for later, as well as reservations at a Chinese restaurant in town. James is unwilling to even entertain the idea of doing dinner again in town. The idea itself is even confounding. Why would they have a Chinese place on La Tolca? Em asks to be excused, saying that she'll meet him on the beach later. So we already have some general idea of James as a character already. He's struggling for inspiration and also seems to be just kind of completely checked out, kind of robotically going through the motions of his boring ass life. That all changes when he strolls down the beach, coming to a clamoring crowd. There's a local guy on a four-wheeler tearing up the sand as people watch on. James is mortified, covering his mouth at the sight. Not sure what is exactly so scary, and that's kind of the point too. From his appearance, you would think James would be a much more masculine sort of guy. Skarsgård has played many times. I mean, Tarzan, hello. However, James is a long way from his previous loincloth incarnation. He chokes out to no one. What is going on? And a random lady, Gabby, informs him that it's a local trying to make a statement. As for what kind exactly, they are apparently not huge fans of the tourists being on their island. According to her, what they'd like to see is all of them killed and hung up at the airport with all the others. James finds that a bit extreme, and Gabby tells him, well, the Tolkiens are a quite dramatic people. Then she surprisingly reveals that not only has she read his book, but she loved it. James is taken aback, but thanks her. After all, not too many have read it. They formally introduce themselves, and she brings over her husband, Alban. He remembers the
There
book
it
too,
is.
and Gabby gushes that it's brilliant.
There's the
James
crash.
clearly is unused to compliments and revels in the moment. She invites him to dinner to get to know him a little better, and they already have reservations at Yang's, which must be the Chinese restaurant Em mentioned that he actively refused to check out. Looks like Gabby's positivity has changed his tune. At the restaurant, which does look like a typical bastardized Chinese establishment, Gabby describes it as a multicultural experience. It's certainly an experience, James scoffs. As for Alban's line of work, he formerly was an architect, but now runs a journal called The Glass Pane, and it's in Paris that the pair first met. Since she couldn't get work there, she made him move to the States. James weakly inquires, what does she do? Well, I'm an actress, of course. He has a contract in commercials boasting that they're grooming her. Her expertise is in failing naturally. The others don't know what she means. You know, finding a natural seeming way to fail at a given task. She simply can't go on without the product, you know? Alban suggests a demonstration, and Gabby places a bagel in front of her. She feebly tries cutting out the bagel, but just can't quite get it. It's impossible. No one can cut bread with a knife, she moans. That's why she needs the bun chop. James, do you need the bun chop? Well, clearly I do, he concurs. The subject turns to the extended wait for James's next tome. It's been 6 years since his first one. Is it going to be coming out anytime soon? We'll see, he grumbles. Gabby is afraid that she offended him, and Em steps in, saying that he hasn't been writing lately. Is it writer's block? James is starting to think that it's more due to lack of talent than anything else. He came here in search of inspiration, a resort, which he actually finds quite pathetic. They're curious in that case, what does he do for money? And Em chuckles that luckily he married rich. Alban knows it's good for an artist to have a patron, but after all this time, Em fears that it's in danger of becoming a charitable organization. She half jokes, clearly also fed up with supporting him with nothing to show for it. Gabby eyes James, and it looks like she is starting to pick up on those core issues for him as a person. After dinner, they cut a rug on the creepy slow-motion dance floor, or at least Gabby and James do. He is clearly enraptured with her, giving her the goo-goo eyes, and she stares right back with a devilish look on her face. In the morning, they are to meet up with the couple again, but Em isn't exactly thrilled. killed. They're essentially strangers, and they were told to never leave the safe zone of the compound. He's confident that they can trust them, while she thinks that he's just happy that he found his fan club. He jokes, hey, at least they're out there somewhere, and promises that it'll be a load of fun. Gabby greets them enthusiastically, and an employee has lent them their car for the day. The gates are unlocked, and we see how serious they are about security, with barbed wire fences surrounding the resort. They drive out on a picturesque road overlooking the coast, and it is much more naturally beautiful just outside of the resort walls. Not getting the real experience unless you leave the freaking resort at the point. However, things are far from luxurious for the local population, seeing them all living in rustic huts working the land. An obviously massive difference from the disconnected rich tourists staying in their fancy
Icy
hotel.
grave.
They arrive at a lovely beach to soak up some rays and fry up some buffalo sausages. James's infatuation can no longer be denied, as he can't even help but be bewitched by Gabby. Albin offers him another sausage, and James groans that he's stuffed. Albin jokes that he's trying to fatten him up, and he will be their final course. Will fry you up and feed him his balls, like a real marriage. Em chimes in, perhaps she already gobbled his jewels long ago. And Albin has to know, why him? He has no money. She chalks it up to daddy issues, as in her dad hates him. Her father runs a publishing house, and the one thing that he asked was for her to never marry a writer. But as her father was a monster as well, she married the first broke writer that spilled coffee on her. Now that's true love, getting back at your a-hole dad. The perfect foundation for marriage. That becomes more complicated when James goes off to take a leak. He hears someone approaching and is startled to see that it's Gabby. She takes a grab onto James Jr. and gives him a proper reach around. James has some very serious reactions, as though he hasn't had his pee-pee played with in quite some time. He gets increasingly animated and shoots his shot. There's something I have to bring up about this scene, which is related to the original unrated cut of the movie. Pretty much every review I read from its film festival premiere described a scene with a prosthetic penis prominently displayed. And at this part, I was like, oh man, it must be during this. So imagine my disappointment when no faux peen showed up. What the heck, you know? American cinema is so afraid of dicks for whatever reason. Let's hope we get that unrated cut at one point. I demand penis! He turns back to her in disbelief. Like, did that really just happen? And Gabby casually strolls off without a word. Later that night, the party is finally dwindling down, yet Albin is way too drunk to drive. James offers in his stead, and before long, everyone else is passed out in the car. James isn't looking too aware himself, and it's only made more difficult to focus when the headlights start to randomly blink, making it completely dark ahead on the road. James fiddles with the switch, but the lights continue malfunctioning. He looks down and punches at it, and with his eyes off the road, plows right into somebody. Way to go, bud. The others pour out and are shocked at the sight. James defends that it was an accident. They need to call someone, the resort or the police or somebody. However, Gabby knows all about how the law works around here and puts the kibosh on that. According to her, they aren't civilized here. Their jails are brutalized and filthy, and would certainly meet their demises if they were imprisoned. So despite their better judgment, the group agreed to leave the injured person behind to die. Great vacation. There's a moment of worry when they wander back to the resort's gates. Initially, the guards are uncertain of letting them in. Again, it's against the rules to leave the safe zone. They promise that it won't happen again, and with that, they're allowed back inside. See, rules don't apply to them. What he did isn't sitting well with James, who soon tosses his cookies, obviously racked with guilt. The other couple isn't even
didn't mean to
fake,
click on that.
leaving with a friendly "we'll see you at breakfast." However, soon consequences come a-calling, as he is awoken by officers at his room in the morning. They sternly tell the couple to come along. They're taken through another confounding area of twisted pipes and derelict buildings. Him is hyperventilating with anxiety, clutching James's hand tightly. They're escorted into the police HQ, where they are quickly separated. He shouts after that he will find her. He's dragged into his cell and given a uniform. Left on his own for some time, James is forced to chew on what could be his fate. Later, a Detective Thresh enters and apologizes for keeping him waiting. He assures him that Em is fine. They were just talking, calling her a lovely woman. You must feel quite lucky. There already is some corruption to the case right off the bat, as it was the detective's Uncle George who loaned them his car for their beef BBQ. If his role in the crime comes up, it would be quite bad for George. So is James willing to lie about what happened? He's curious how that would actually help him, and it won't at all, but he at least would appreciate it. James agrees, and then poses the question to him. Did he rent you his car? No, James grumbles. Good, the detective replies. He details an account of what went down more or less accurately, them fleeing without contacting the police after a hit and run and everything. This is according to his wife what happened. James is a bit surprised that Em said that, and that is the case, the detective finding her quite forthcoming in fact. Sure, that is the true story of what happened, but it also shows us how easily she was willing to throw her husband under the bus with unknown consequences. Thanks, hon. As it turns out, the punishment is quite severe. According to their laws, if someone is responsible for the death of a man, his eldest son kills him to maintain the family's honor. They do it right here in the building. Of course, James can't believe what he's hearing. He's going to be put to death for what he did? The detective continues that in the case of there being no son, the state will do the deed instead. Luckily, the victim has 2 sons. James tried to plead with him and apologizes for his
What's up?
actions. I mean, he can't die, right? There is an alternative option available to escape his fate, thanks to a special act for international visitors and diplomats for a quite substantial sum of money. The state will pay double of the accused to take their place in the execution. So basically, once more, if you have
got nothing really else on the
anything,
plate.
it's also by law that the double will maintain its original's memories and thusly will also believe itself guilty of the same crimes committed at the time of its death. This is a lot for James to wrap his head around, and the detective lays it out pretty plainly. Would you rather be executed or do the double thing? Well, when you put it that way, let's hit the ATM, bro. Doctors measure all over his body
I'm gonna
and
wait
strip
until
him
they
down
put out the
completely.
PvE
A rubber
mode.
cover is placed on his head, and a weird thing is affixed into his mouth to keep it forced wide open. He's pushed into another one, and he takes a step into a red gooey substance. The doctor lady shows him how to keep his hands and slams the door closed. James looks around in suspenseful anticipation, hearing some pipes beginning to gurgle. Another blue substance starts bubbling in, and the roaring of the device gets louder. He's overwhelmed by strobing colors and waves of light passing over him. There's a flash of what looks like Gabby dancing in the nude in front of a bunch of spinning lights. Amongst the flashes, an inky mask appears on her face. The flashing gets more intense, and James's face is sliced into cubes. Things reach a fever pitch of insanity, and James comes back to completely baffled by what just happened. Yeah, get in line, pal.
You know the season started today,
The
right?
double procedure was a success, and now it's time for the ceremony downstairs.
I didn't want you to think I just played this out of random want to play it.
No, I know it started today. I'm just probably gonna wait. I'm gonna leaving tomorrow to go to Oregon for the weekend, so I'll probably just like start it and come back.
Then tries to discuss that it's horrible, but James is more intrigued by just how similar it looks. He gets closer, and James too gasps
Going
to
on like
life
an
to his
best
shock.
time and
The
then have to
officers
take
then
like a
show them
4-day
out to the
break from it.
mandatory witnessing of the execution. In a large hall, the double is tied to a pole with his washboard abs on display. The real James and M watch from the stands on the verge of their seats. One of the victim's son enters the arena wielding a knife. He struts right up to James too, and James watches on with a morbid curiosity. His double sheepishly begs for his
class did
life
you go
and
this
cries
time?
for him to save
Rogue.
him. He's barely able to even keep it together, her lips trembling at the
I think
seams.
Rogue is
The
supposed
boy
to be
jabs
pretty high
right into
tier
his
this
gut, and he
this
keeps on
season.
stabbing,
It's like by
unleashing a
far the
fountain
most
of
popular
blood on the
class
ground.
already.
Despite, or perhaps because,
Rogue and
of the
Druid.
James cannot look away, watching it
Yeah, I think they were like the two that
Double's
like
eyes. It's pretty clear that this experience has awoken something
got hurt
dormant.
the least by
As a
nerves.
small smile crosses his face, but this is just the beginning of his journey to being reborn. After that harrowing experience,
Which is kinda ironic,
he's
'cause they're
immediately
super strong at, like-
in a daze, staring at the ashes that he was
Like
kissing with
endgame,
his thumb.
endgame.
She snaps him into
And
action,
I
runs to
I know
his
there's
face.
zero
He's
chance I'm
unable to
gonna make
find
it
his
that far.
passport. Looks like he's stuck here.
But
Then flips on him, shrieking that they have to leave.
pretty
But
strong
no
so
such
far.
luck. He offers that she can leave.
It's a little
and
bit
he'll
more
follow
active
after
playstyle
as
than
soon as he
Source,
can.
keeps
Im
you a
has
little
more on
more-
her mind than travel plans, and is
little more
disturbed by his
engaged.
reaction to the execution. You could just sit there and watch it happen, and she can't comprehend what is wrong with him. Lots, as it turns out. He blankly tells her that he'll go down to the front desk and see if they can help. He explains the situation to them, and they ask if he wants to extend his stay. With the rainy season fast approaching, the room is still available. It's pretty clear why he is interested in sticking around, making eyes with Gabby sitting nearby. He asks to stay another week, and oh yeah, it's still under my wife's credit card. Thanks so much. She tries to apologize for everything that went down, and tempts him to come have a drink. It's telling that he doesn't turn her down after all the craziness of the past 24
which
hours,
rogue
but
build are
again,
you
he is
gonna
more
do?
intrigued than upset.
Right now I'm just doing the
Now, word
poison
from this
stuff,
week's
but I
sponsor,
don't know if I'll
HelloFresh,
stay with
America's
it or
number
not.
one meal kit. There's a lot to love about HelloFresh, especially just how easy it is to put together a fresh, delicious tasting meal. It's also great for saving a buck, as it's 25% less expensive than takeout. And delivery fees, forget about it. Plus, cooking is fun too, so you're saving money and having even fresher and tastier meals at home. They also have a ton of variety, with up to 40 different weekly recipes to choose from, with something for every taste and even calorie-conscious eaters. They sent me a box to try for myself, and I loved everything I cooked. The whole experience really couldn't be easier. The box is delivered right to your door after all, and thanks to pre-portioned ingredients, there's no waste. Plus they come with easy to follow recipe cards with step-by-step instructions and pictures. So in no time you'll be enjoying a delicious home-cooked meal that you cooked. How great is that? If you want to try out HelloFresh for yourself,
David
check
said
out
you guys
my
had like a
special
bowling
offer.
thing?
Go to hellofresh.com/ending60.
Yeah, we went
and use
to
code
it's like a
ending60 for
work thing or
60%
whatever.
off plus
Manager
free
took
shipping.
us out
That's
for bowling on the
hellofresh.com/ending60
company dime.
and use code
Nice.
ending60 for 60% off plus free shipping. She fills him in on their first experience on the island. At the
That was
time,
nice.
Albin was installing an infinity pool, title drop, of his own design in one of the resorts. During the installation, a plate fell and killed 2 workers. Albin took the blame,
We
and it was
worked
then that
3
they encountered
hours
the
and
doubling for themselves to
fucking
escape their crimes.
went
I'll delve a
bowling
bit
for
more
2
into
and
this
then
at
went
the end,
home.
but already we can see the correlation between an actual infinity pool and the titles meaning. The whole idea is that there is no edge, you can see forever. The same goes for James.
Yeah,
and his
David was
newfound
talking in
awakening.
the
As
my
they learn
stream
after
chat.
this, there really is no edge because there are no true consequences as long as they have cash. This comes further into the forefront when Gabby introduces them to their other so-called zombies that have all been doubled as well. Since they have gone through the doubling process multiple times, they no longer feel bound to follow the laws or rules of society anymore. They can essentially do whatever they want. One guy, Bob, is writing a paper on the doubling process and has an intriguing question for James. Does he ever wonder if they got the wrong man? You just wake up and have no idea. Perhaps the real him is the one that actually died. Did he just witness his own demise? James chuckles that he certainly hopes so. There's a lot of meaning behind that statement, but ultimately he doesn't want to go back to who he was before. Either way, he hopes the old version of himself is dead. Who cares if he's a real one or not? And as they mentioned, the double is an exact 1-to-1 copy. So in a way, what is the difference? James gets a bit overwhelmed, and Gabby comes to calm his nerves. She knows the first day is difficult. It's like a new skin working itself into place. She too can tell that he has changed, in his case feeling something special is happening to him. She takes his hand on her heart and asks him to trust her. Before he can even answer, they're shocked by the sound of a gun firing. One of the group fires it with great abandon all around the room to everyone's amusement, also noting that he got it from a cleaner. Charles has heard of his passport problems and offers to help him out in exchange for playing a little game. You're like, oh god, what is that gonna be? They propose a heist of sorts. Another
Be
big
back in a
wig, the
second.
very same that placed the blame of the infinity pool accident on Gabby and Albin, was just recently granted an award for good work for the island. They want to steal it for themselves. It's all just a bit of fun. But also after what he did, Gabby feels they must retaliate at some point, or otherwise they will end up cowering on the ground to never get up again. They ask if James is interested, giving him further incentive with a gun to the ribs. He doesn't need to be forced, slamming the rest of his drink and shattering it on the ground. They first break into the gift shop, and it's a complete farce. They're all giggles and rolling around on the ground with their gun, not even remotely taking this seriously. They each are bestowed an Iki mask of their own, as determined by Bex. The mask gang rolls out and makes their way to their adversary's estate. They send in James first, who does so without a second thought. He tiptoes up to the door, but it's locked. To his surprise, it opens from the inside, and he stumbles into the house. The rest gang rush after and take the lady hostage. The girls bust into a bedroom, bringing the guy out along with his lover as well. The others raid the house in search of the metal and do find it, everyone whooping in celebration. Naked and afraid, James marches behind the trio, clutching a gun. Gabby naturally wants to push him further, asking if he's ever fired one before. She takes it in her hand, croaking, "It would be so easy. Not everyone gets this chance." Again, would you murder someone just to see what it was like, knowing that you don't have to face any consequences? She lifts the gun right up to the dude's head, but James still can't do it. Another guy tries to play hero, opening fire upon the group, which goes about as well as expected. A few innocent people are taken out, but only Albin gets winged in the leg. They'll help assist him back to the hotel, passing by a strange Indian Bollywood dancing show going on. And you're like, what the hell is the culture of this island exactly? Just bastardized versions of everything, I guess. Weird. James takes them to his room, coming to a mortified M. Albin is bleeding profusely and yowls out in pain. The group are all arrested once more, but none are taking it seriously, complaining about the wait time and lack of water. Tretch enters and is unamused by their apparent inconvenience. He's had enough of them exploiting their hospitality and decides to make an example of them. The group is roughly rounded up, and now they are growing a little scared. It's back to the murder hall for you, and each is cuffed to a respective box. And now they are taking things seriously, as it looks like they're about to die for real. Impressively, James fights off his captor characters and turns a knife onto the others. This is already a far cry from the first James copy, who just kind of meekly pleaded. This one actually puts up a fight. It's for naught as he is overtaken and his throat is slit. It's all a switcheroo, seeing the real gang is watching on amused from the seats. Albin compliments his double. I didn't even think you had it in you, James, and the rest of the doubles are dispensed of. James returns to his room with the fresh ashes of another double. Em is there looking like she's at the end of a rope. He doesn't get what is wrong with her, and she turns this on him, as obviously this James is not the James that she knows. Em looks him over in confusion and asks once more, is this a dream? Because that would make sense at least. She's had enough and decides to leave on her own, and knows that she is already footing the bill. James callously tells her to run home to daddy, but as soon as she leaves, he regrets his words, shouting after to wait, but it's too late. He embraces his new persona, donning his Iki mask and smoking a stogie out on the beach. Gabby appears, eyeing him like the prey that he obviously is for her. She takes a seat, giving him the big eye routine, and he glumly informs her that Em left. She thinks that's actually for the best, and in her opinion, she doesn't suit him. Women like that train men to make them feel weak. She knows that this damage can be undone, but it will take some work, and more importantly, some blood. Out of nowhere, she goes in for a passionate smooch, and the rain starts to fall, indicating rainy season or the summoning is fast approaching. She then introduces him to a local traditional root drug, Iki Gate, which she was able to procure from a guard. It's both a hallucinogenic and aphrodisiac. Oh boy, time for liftoff, Jamesy. The only reason that it's even around, as all drugs are outlawed here, is that it's considered to be religious. Again, the island's traditions are being corrupted by the wealthy for their own amusement. She lights the root and places it in a ceremonial bowl, offering it to James. He takes a whiff, causing him to immediately cough and sputter. It's horrible.
Yeah,
he
we just
scowls,
started the
and
last
she's hopeful
mission.
that he'll come to like
Apparently the
it.
entire
Gabby
other
takes a
team except one
humongous whiff
person
and
all
kisses the
bots.
rest back in his mouth. He's curious how long it'll take to take effect, but it's pretty clear when random trippy colors start taking over. Yeah, I'd say it's working. Things really start heating up as things become a pretty much straight up cosmic orgy featuring the entire zombie crew, a colorful mass of twisting flesh obscured in the lights. Eventually things get so muddled that you can't even really tell what the hell is even happening anymore. We see James looking wide-eyed and bewildered by the experience, and a nipple starts to pus something grody, which of course someone gobbles down on, and well, that was quite a lovely evening, folks. Thanks for the total drug-fueled madness. This all certainly has a profound effect on James, who sinks further into his new, darker, and more deranged persona. The couple is trying to enjoy their breakfast, but it keeps being bombarded by rogue cherries. It's James responsible, spitting them at them while the group laughs and eggs him on. Charles has news on the passport front, and that issue is so far from James's mind, he responds with a befuddled, about what? He's told that it's the detective Thrash behind the holdup. He is the one preventing him from leaving, in hopes of further filling his own piggy bank. Gabby encourages him that when it comes to stripes with locals, the only thing they appreciate is dominance over their enemies. They have a chance to strike soon, Bob learning that the detective is due for a medical checkup this very night. They roll out and James is looking way messed up. He's told to stay behind and they'll be back in a jiffy. Left alone, he stares off into space and starts passing out. No time for that as a police van rolls up and James worries that they're after him. They accelerate and almost run right into him, but James leaps out of the way. The others return, apparently victorious, with someone rolled out on a gurney. They get set up at the villa, including another batch of the root drug for James. He takes in a deep breath and then another to grow on, and he was really feeling that last hit by the looks of it. He swigs some wine and stumbles over to the guy with his head covered. He dumps some booze right on him, and Gabby tells him to show him your strength. He psychs himself up, flopping his arms around and speaking gibberish. He gets more and more animated, grunting around the room, and socks the guy right in the face. He goes for another punch and then kicks him to the ground. He drags him by his legs while everyone cheers and laughs. Gabby looks on quite pleased by his progress into becoming completely unhinged. He pummels him a bit more before unleashing urine right on his head. The others join in on the fun, and James throws his hands up in jubilee. Gabby leans down and removes the hood, shockingly seeing it's actually another James underneath. Oh boy. Yep, they are messing with him again to an increasingly alarming degree. They all think it's a big laugh, but James is horrified and leaves. He holds up in his room, clicking into place every lock he can. Yet that isn't going to be enough to keep his new pals away. He's lured by the sound of singing from outside and sees the group below serenading them in their Iki masks. There's a knock on the door from Gabby, hoping that he's not upset. It's just a joke, Jamesy. They pay the detective to make another clone of him just to have some fun. He stays mum, and she gets frustrated, calling it pathetic, which he finds quite unattractive. In another twist of sorts, James goes under the sink and retrieves his passport, meaning that he never actually lost it. He in fact stashed it because he didn't want to leave. Ever since he's doubling, he has been intrigued by finding out more about Gabby's world. A lot of fun, huh? Although now he has finally reached his own limit, and attempts to escape the resort. At first, when he's on the bus, he appears to have outmaneuvered his freaky new pal. So, he hears a horn honking, and they pull up right next to them. James speedily tries to cower into the seat, and when they pull back up, Gabby opens fire. The driver pulls over, and the gang has blocked the road. It's the end of the line, Gabby shrieks. Now also seeing just how crazy Gabby really is, she starts shouting for him in a strange tone. Where you going, little baby? He cackles. Man, Mia Goth is nuts. It's kind of hilarious. She addresses the others on the bus and promises to harm no one else as long as James gives himself up. She decries him as a spineless worm and a bedwetter who would give up his own mother to save himself. He finally gets to his feet and Gabby is delighted, cooing insanely to come here, little baby. They further amp up the humiliation at his expense, slowly trailing him down the road while Gabby rides on the hood of the car, hurling insults about just how pathetic he is. A real sucky baby, you know. They spill the truth regarding their friendship. It was all a setup from the beginning. She's the one that actually picks out the marks herself. They've been laughing at him the whole time. He's just a little bit of fun on their vacation. Rude. She reminds him of running over that guy. And that actually wasn't a part of their plan. It was just that James is such a buffoon, he managed to get into that trouble all by himself. And she digs the knife in even deeper. She's never even actually read his book. And this does get to James. She chalks up him believing it to her skills as an actress. She actually thinks it was quite vain. He thought they had read it. It's a bit funny, but most of all, depressing. To really make her point clear, she reads from an incredibly harsh critical article on his book. The book has nothing to say and lacks the words to say it. The article concludes that potentially the only reason this book even exists is due to the author's publisher father-in-law. Dang, really calling my boy out. This also really helps us understand how much of a lie his life was, and that he was in fact not so talented in his chosen field. Yet another reason that he was tempted by Gabby's insanity. Something you haven't tried before, the wine bottle rolls off the hood, and James takes the chance to go for the gun. He is easily dealt with, but does manage to make a break for it off into the wilderness. Gabby is disappointed and starts shooting after his direction. One shot does get him in the leg, seriously slowing him down. He groans to his feet and makes it to a clearing, finding a rickety old farm there. He's spotted by some people looking concerned. James weakly calls for help, but can't go on anymore, collapsing. He regains consciousness inside the humble abode, and the girls must have tended to his wounds. A boy peeks out surveying him, which we recognize from the first killing, as in he somehow wound up at his victim's house. And even after that, they still helped him. Shows us the real difference between the locals and tourists. The boy smirks a big smile and takes a seat on the bed. He starts gleefully choking James, who grabs him
use his like
Flashes
posting
returns,
abilities on like
the face right off,
one
revealing
person, like the whole ring or whatever that he can
please help
summon.
me, she cackles.
You put it
The
on
same thing
one
the first
person,
couple said when
as
he
everyone
was
else is
killed.
dying.
There's several more flashes, and then we see M surrounded by other people now in chopped up face zombie masks. Back in the room, it's now her choking him, while the others dance around. She continues laughing, and James splits her head further open. There's a splatter of blood and the sound of the fateful car accident that sent James down this path. He comes to again in bed, but there's no one else in the house, leaving him wondering once more, is this a dream or reality? He walks outside and quickly is completely lost in the darkness. Until a series of headlights flash on, and Gabby greets him with a "Look who has emerged back from the dead." Albin invites him to come closer, offering his hand. James is hesitant, but does still do as told. They promise that today they are going to fix it. It's been hard, but they want to help him understand that this is truly a mission of mercy. It's time to shed that disgusting larval mind of yours and find out what kind of creature you really are. Bring the dog, she orders. Bex leads it out, also clutching a bowl of the root drug. It's actually the other James, now on all fours, and Louis holds out the bowl for him to take a whiff, and Dog James breathes deeply and begins to grunt primally. Gabby explains that the dog is here for him to complete his transformation. Just as she said back on the beach, it's only through blood that you can truly unleash yourself from your past. James is handed a blade, looking quite shaken up. Sacrifice the dog, Gabby lays out, as the final stage of his journey of self-discovery. He refuses, which only amuses her. She tells him to pick it up. He shakes his head no, until she motivates him with a gun, knowing this is truly for his own good. You pick it up, he retorts defiantly, and tosses the blade away. Dog James makes the first move, and the two tussle on the ground. Dog James bites at his arms and is unrelenting in his strikes. He gets his hand around his throat, and James attempts to keep him at bay, looking like he is going to lose the battle with himself. He digs down deep and growls, achieving the upper hand. He unleashes a flurry of punches upon his double dog's head until it is caved into a pile of gristle and bone. Well, there's that creature Gabby has been truly trying to unleash the whole time. Yet after the deed is done, he still seems to shirk back into his cowering nature. But this time, Gabby takes him in her arms. As he sniffles in her bosom, she rubs her fingers on his blood-stained hand. She applies some onto her nipple, offering it to James, who gratefully suckles down. He has effectively been reborn born in blood just as Gabby had intended. The question is, what will become of James? Will he return to his old life or embrace the new one? In the morning, he's on the phone with Em, telling her of his flight plans and saying he's genuinely sorry. I miss you, he croaks. He wraps up his impressive 3 urn collection with extra padding to keep them safe. He waits by the bus and bumps into his friends, but they have reverted back to their kind of real-life selves, actually fake, another form of the masks people wear. The couples chatter about mundane things like scheduling a gardener or that Gabby redecorates the house whenever she's bored. James watches on stupefied. How can they pretend like none of that happened? At the airport, Gabby and Alvin give him a casual goodbye, and James is still left wondering, what in the fuck? Seriously? He looks around at the others, all awaiting to return home themselves. The drone of their chatter takes over, the nonsense swelling before fading away. The gate is now mostly empty, but James is still there. An announcer calls it the final boarding call for Melbourne. James looks at his ticket and passport, weighing the decision heavily before him. He ultimately decides to stay. The resort now closed for the rainy season, seeing it cascading down the windows. The bar sits empty, and the high tide splashes up from the beach. James is sitting there, completely soaked, looking steely-eyed out into the water. His ultimate choice was clear. He can no longer pretend to be who he once was after his life-changing vacation. There's certainly a lot of different factors at play, from what it means to be a person, co-opting island culture, clones, and so much more. But front and center is James's rebirth as a man, unshackled from his old, unfulfilling life. When he first came to the island, he was bored and in search of inspiration for his writing, or really the meaning in his own life. The problem being he was pursuing this muse with misguided intentions because he has lost touch with what even is reality thanks to his wealthy wife. This becomes his journey, to be confronted with this idea of reality and in a way his own identity represented in all forms. Is it a dream, a drug-addled hallucination, or what? No matter the interpretation, its central purpose is to guide us through James's rebirth as a person. And we also, of course, see that clear divide between the consequence-free wealthy and the hardworking locals there to bend to their will at every moment. Before meeting Gabby, James was repressed for a variety of reasons and essentially created a facade of himself to fit in. He really wasn't a writer. He was just another
Hey, Andrew.
person
Yeah, it
struggling
started
in a
at 1
desperate
today.
search of meaning.
So I've been
This
playing it
seemed
for
to
most of
gnaw
the day.
him away over time, and that's what led to his desire to find something else. What he has been doing with him is a dead end, but he doesn't feel he has any other options. There's also the idea of play of masculinity and how it relates to femininity. Em thought of James as beneath her, just a tool to get back at her father. She is always shoving him down and drawing into question his talents. But it's also only thanks to her cash that he's at this luxury compound and even able to save his own life repeatedly, thanks to more money. Conversely, enter Gabby, who praises his work, or really just stroking his ego. And she wants to push him further into more absolute questions of what it even means to be him as a person. What makes us who we are? What is James? But really, she's just kind of fucking with him, pushing him to the edge to see what he'll do. Is there a limit? They represent very different sides of female influence. Gabby is pushing him for her own amusement, but also sees James's true pathetic and wavering soul. However, it's also only thanks to her that he can finally unlock and embrace who he is at his core. A deranged madman for all intents and purposes. It's also funny because James's decision to stay on the island illuminates another facet to his choice. Just before he decided to stay, he was still playing his fake role with Em on the phone, all apologetic and whatnot. See you soon, honey. But he ultimately still turns his back on this to stay on the island. He is unable to pretend anymore. But this also means he doesn't have Em's bankroll anymore either. So no more clones to get him out of trouble. What he was shown by Gabby now has a real weight to it because he can no longer pay his way out of his rash actions. This really adds an extra finality to his choice. He knows he can't go back, but also can no longer pretend
They kind
to
of
be
fell
who he
into the
isn't.
same
No
trap that
matter
other
the
people
costume,
did where they
financially,
weren't
or more
updating the
importantly, as a
database, so they
person.
kept doing the
Perhaps
same
now
like
he can
maps
truly
and
appreciate the
missions
value
and
of his
stuff
new
over
life
and over,
as
but
it's the only one he's got left.
they
That
didn't
brings us to the
hate it,
conclusion
but
of
they
this inning
didn't
explained for Infinity Pool. And
really
don't forget,
like
before
it
we go,
either.
you can send your questions or TV
because like there's only like a couple missions and there's only one game mode and
what did you think
stuff
of
like
Infinity Pool and
that.
its ending? What are your thoughts on the story?
I
Let me know your
like
thoughts down
I
in
was
the
like
comments
watching while I
below.
was
Make sure to
driving,
like,
so I was
subscribe,
like
and follow.
vaguely
Thanks for
remembering.
watching Conflicts. See you next time.
Do I get more? I want to play Skywave. Do I get
Skywave
more
is kind of
XP?
weird.
What?
Skywave is kind of weird.
Hey, how's it
I
going?
played
Bannermans.
just played her
On this
a couple
Explained Vid,
matches
we'll
ago.
review the recent hit Netflix series, Archive,
I feel like her
involving
healing
an
is
archivist
kind
who
of
takes a job
underwhelming
restoring
though.
damaged videotapes
Like you
and
might.
finds himself getting pulled into a mystery
Yeah, I was
involving a young woman's disappearance and a strange cult
I was
that may be
streaming
trying to
and then
destroy
like
the world.
no one was
If
saying
you
anything for
really
like 45
enjoyed this
minutes and then I
series,
looked
does
back
TikTok
like over at the
acknowledge your
stream
character a lot
clicked on the like stream stuff,
but really it was how the story unfolded that really
and my stream had frozen.
adds more and more layers to the increasingly complicated story.
So I was like, oh wow, I think my stream like died like before I even knew it.
Huge change from where things start to where they end up. It was kind of crazy to think about when the finale ended. There is a ton of plot and various mysteries to look into that pop up over the course of the season, and you know that's what I'm all about. We're gonna leave no stone or mystery unturned. Really digging
Oh, were you able to get on and play?
aspect of the show, which is also why this video is like an hour
Finally.
long. There's just a lot to cover. Well, it is a fairly complex story. It actually feels simple in the end and wraps up a lot of the bigger mysteries. That is, except when it comes to the ending itself, that I really feel like blows open the whole show's world into an exciting new direction and leaves us with a ton
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
and there is a bunch of stuff to
But then I had to
look
run
at
some
the rest
errands
of the
anyway, so I was like,
itself.
yeah, I'll just go
Well,
do that
no
now,
time to waste.
and then I
So
could
let's
stream
get to
most of the night.
In Archive 81, breaking down the story and its many mysteries, just what the cult is all about and what they desire. as
My
well as
game's gonna
exploring
crash. Might as well
and
restart it now.
theorizing where things could go in season 2.
I think there's a memory leak in the game or something to do with my computer and the game.
Message from a young woman, Melody, who turns to the camera asking for help, and the search for her becomes the backbone of our story as it develops. In the Big Apple, we meet Dan. who
Yeah, it's
has
the
a
game.
peculiar interest in strange old tapes, seemingly
It's a
trying
pain
to
in the
find
ass.
things forgotten or lost, which he brings back to life.
Usually I die,
The street
or I
vendor
die.
mentions
Usually I
that
crash
Jill
before
stopped by
it gets
recently,
super
and I
bad, but this
mentioned
time
the
it's
name
like, okay,
Ambush.
I'm just gonna
Check
do it
out,
myself.
asking if they're still on friendly terms. Doesn't sound like it, and Jill must be an ex of Dan's that had a big impact on him. He works at the Museum of Moving Images and looks to be quite skilled at his craft. A new collection comes in from a woman called Evie Crest, and the footage is in dire need of help. Its contents are a lost movie called
Let me
The
look up
Circle,
if-
starring an actor William Crest, Evie's dad, which features a kind of strange cult ritual. Dan explaining it's a horror anthology, a pre-Twilight Zone kind of thing. It was Evie that discovered a box of old tapes buried at his estate, both agreeing it is some pretty creepy shit. The lady suggests that this could get him some real glory, but Dan is only interested in giving Evie a piece of her father back. Very important to his character and what he's all about. This speaks to the power that film and video can have. It lives long past ourselves. His boss gives him a new mysterious
I guess
project.
this is kind of a
tape that
common
is
issue.
Smashed and burnt. He rebuilds the cassette and watches
Not a
the
common
footage,
issue,
Melody,
but
the girl from the opening, who is doing a dissertation on the Visser apartment building. She jokes with her friend Annabelle, saying that she's worried she'll find a new best friend, but Mel promises that she won't, and the tape cuts. Dan is already curious
whatever.
and does a Googler onto the apartments, learning about a fire back in 1994 that killed at least 11. Yet
Yeah, he's a
strangely,
little squishy.
No bodies were ever found. Dan's buddy Mark runs a podcast, and while Mark is
Oh,
a
yeah,
believer in
that'll do it
supernatural,
too.
telling the story of a cursed wedding,
Rogue is technically the
doesn't
squishiest
believe in
character,
any
but
of that kind of
once you
shit.
start getting
Doesn't
like your
believe
decoys and stuff, you can kind of
telling
take the
him
heat
to
off
let him know
yourself.
if he needs help, to which Dan limply agrees. So there is some kind of issues that Dan has gone through recently, which his friend is worried about bubbling back up to the surface. His boss is impressed with his work on the crispy tape, and he's invited to meet the man who sent it, who works at the mysterious LNG company housed in a looming large building. There he meets Virgil, who has an offer for him. Dan first is confused just what this place does. He couldn't find any info on them whatsoever, and Virgil points out that it was the same for Dan. Both agreeing.
Yeah,
that
Source and Rogue. I think Rogue's technically a little squishier, but I feel like I was squishier as Sorceress, even though I don't think I'm supposed to.
And there are several other tapes that he wants.
I feel like I was squishier as Sorceress, but I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. I think Rogue's technically supposed to be the squishier one.
Work must be done at a remote facility in the Catskills. Suspicions are only getting started. Dan appears about to turn him down, and Virgil proves that he knows more than he's letting on, bringing up that he would have a special understanding of the situation as he lost his family in a fire, and since then he's been spending his life trying to bring things back to people. He's incensed that Virgil somehow knew about his private history, and we flash briefly to him as a kid walking his pooch and humming a creepy melody. His sister is there plucking at the piano, and young Dan stares wide-eyed, coming to his house engulfed in flames. Well, this must be the past incident Virgil was referring to. Dan awakes from the nightmare and is compelled to return to Mel's footage.
What level are you on your
However,
Rogue?
Something catches his eye. It looks like amongst the pics on her mirror, one includes her and his childhood dog Cleo. But how in the world can that be? He shows off the strange connection to Mark, who isn't so sure, considering he's just seeing things that he wants to, and believes that this is somehow all tied back to Jill. He's adamant this is not about her, And besides, he's the one that runs a podcast talking about all kinds of crazy stuff. How is something like this out of the realm of possibility? Mark also
Gotcha.
wasn't able to dig up anything on the company, saying they could be into some sinister stuff. But Dan is confident this is a sign. Besides, if he is seeing what he wants, maybe it's time for him to take a closer look. He rides through the forest with Virgil, who keeps bringing up more personal info about Dan, smirking it off as merely a background check, but still proves this guy isn't showing all of his cards already. Get used to that, Dan. The facility is a bit dated, but quite safe, and at least the technology is top of the line. Oddly, there's no internet, and the cell signal is spotty, but they do have a
Oh, really?
landline.
Yeah, I went the complete opposite direction. I've been completely ignoring Bo.
And you're in the middle of nowhere, not suspicious at all. Virgil takes him down to where the tapes are housed, along with the camera used to shoot them all, and the gig seems straightforward enough. On the way out, Virgil hands him an emergency signal wristband, making sure to mention that includes not just medical, but mental professionals, just in case he needs it, you know. He too seems aware of Dan's breakdown.
Yeah,
despite
I don't blame
how
you.
he initially presented things. Virgil is confident. That's all in the past. He has a clean bill of
My,
regardless, they're available if he needs
my
it.
main,
It's almost like he's expecting him or hoping that he's going to
my
lose
basic
his
attack
gig
puncture is ranged at least.
Tried to work on the first tape, but it's
So it's not
distracted by
completely
another door
melee. If it was, yeah, that
tries
probably
to
get
get in,
annoying.
But is refused access. Dan, scoffing curiosity, killed the cat. The next tape shows Mel on day one of her project on the Visser. According to archives she found, it was built back in the 1930s, but doesn't really stand out amongst the other buildings in the city. Though there is some strangeness to its history, having been built over a mansion that burned down in the 20s and features some strange symbols carved into the outside facade. The maintenance guy, John, takes her through the building and to her new digs. Mel asks him about a Julia Bennett. Did she ever live here? But John is cagey, refusing to answer for what he says are privacy reasons. Also strange, when she asked for advice about meeting new people, he only suggests for her to stay away from the 6th floor. She's awoken later to the sound of faint chanting, pinpointing that it is coming through the vents. She shouts out hello to the opening, and the silence is overtaken by loud static, Mel trying to get herself together. The next day, she knocks on doors in hopes of interviewing the tenants, but no one even bothers to answer. She's given a break, though, when seeing a kid Jess there, who does delivery for the tenants, and she's at least a little more open than the others.
Yeah, not having any AoE
Subjects in exchange for a little bit of cash. Her first interview
doesn't
is
seem
Tamara,
very
a
enjoyable.
musician working on an opera. She plays her
Kinda just
flute from her
handicaps
latest
yourself
work called Purgatory, hearing a
with the
woman's
wardrobe,
voice
huh?
vocalizing along with odd chanting. Mel is confused, thinking that this is exactly what she heard last night in the vents. But before she can answer, a phone call pulls Tamara away. As the song continues, it has a noticeable physical effect on Mel. She gets to her feet only to collapse, asking Jess if the music also makes her feel strange. Dan finds himself humming the strange tune and calls Mark to get him to look into Tamara and the song. He wanders around downstairs trying all the other doors and finds that every single one of them are locked. Virgil calls in to check on him while he's fiddling with a box with another film in it that must be important to Dan. Scouring through the bookshelves, he finds a notebook that looks like a daily log of some kind, but stuffs it back in without much thought. He is flooded with more flashes of memories, his sister playing the same weird song from Tamara's, and he wakes up. Having caught a rat, he can't bring himself to get rid of it, and rather decides to befriend it, aiming at Ratty. Well, very clever. He fixes another tape featuring Jess's interview with Mel, revealing that she was born in the building, right out in the stairwell, leaving her wondering if it is perhaps bad luck to be born in this place. Mel doesn't think so, and is more curious about what led people to the building in the first place, just considering that perhaps something pulled them here.
Is that not gonna
asking
do it?
if Sam told her about the building, but Mel doesn't know who that is just yet. Jess suddenly looks out of sorts, backing up in her chair with a blank gaze. Her breath quickens, and she's lifted to her feet, appearing to be choked, and tumbles to the floor convulsing. The tape slows and gets distorted, the image changing to a white outline of a figure amongst the static.
Change your
The creature
gear's
starts to try to
appearance of
step
the
beyond
wardrobe.
the screen. It appears right in front of Dan, freaking him out and fleeing from the room. He gets through to Mark, who was unable to track down anything on Tamara, but he's already got more for him to look into, namely the LMG company as well as Melody. Looking around the trees, he sees someone nearby with a red hood, but when turning back, they vanished. He has another memory flash of his sister playing the song, saying she heard it on a tape, and their dad comes in growling to stop playing it, telling Dan it's time to take
Nice.
Cleo out for a walk. This fateful walk is what prevented him from burning to death like the rest of his family, which is, pretty tragic. You can see how much it still affects him now. Finding the tape has somehow
Your
gotten him
potion.
schooled. He
Upgrade your
reconstructs it
potion
and
to the
picks up right where he
alchemist.
left off, with Jess now looking more calmed down. According to the doctors, they always say that nothing is wrong. It's just in her imagination. But Mel knows what she saw. She says that her mom takes her to Father
Yeah,
Russo
that sounds like a
for
good plan.
so-called spiritual
Oh, wow.
guidance. She changes
No time, I
the
just
subject
crashed.
to church. Mel used to go,
Like,
but not anymore.
immediately,
And then
like,
asks
10
if
minutes
she
in.
believes if there's a world other than this one. Not heaven or hell, a world like this one, but different. More than this world. She starts talking about an even stranger concept. If she's strong enough to hold a new world inside of her. Mel encouraging, sure, you can do anything you want to. So hold the whole world inside of you, sure. Jess smiles and takes her hand, telling her that she's happy she's here. The tape suddenly cuts to Mel crying that they took Jess, and she runs into John, reminding her the 6th floor is off limits, sending her back downstairs where she runs into Samuel, who she hasn't technically met.
Which one's
yet. She then
Barrage?
encounters
I'll have to
two
look
other
in a
guys
second.
in uniforms, and we're back at the opening message, pleading for someone to find her and to help. The guys grab her, and shockingly, Dan's dad enters, trying to calm her down. His mind blown, he keeps mumbling that he doesn't understand what's happening, and we pull out seeing the entire facility is covered in cameras from every angle, all overseen by Virgil, of course. Static crackles, and we see a commercial for a DNA testing company called Wellspring, all about how they can help you find your community connection.
Yeah, that sounds kind of dope.
Which we soon find out has a connection to the mysterious LMG. Dan phones Mark with the news of seeing his dad back in '94 at the Visser, and he accuses Virgil of being a liar. He must have known his dad was on the tape, and it was all a setup from the beginning. Yeah, you think? Mark lays out his two options here: leave and never find out what it all means, or keep his cool and keep digging deeper. He knows that his aunt has all of his dad's old files, and tasks Mark to find out if he happens to have any on Melody. On to the next tape, we're back with Mel and Jess, where they run into the aforementioned Father Russo. He immediately invites her to attend service, Mel giving a half-hearted maybe in response. Digging through some tapes in a store, she finds The Secret of Nim, beaming that she loved the book as a kid. And of course, Jess has never heard of it. She purchases an infamous Pixel Vision camera designed for kids back in the 90s with absolutely awful video quality, saying that she too, like Mel, is a filmmaker. She hides it along with some comics and other contraband to keep secret from her.
This might be okay,
ever-absent mother.
depending on
She's
how many
another resident,
grenades that
Cassandra,
it
who
drops. It
seems
doesn't
more
even
than a
say.
little off to me, inviting her up for some tea this afternoon. Another lady, Beatrice, a proclaimed psychic, also feels that the people here are a bit strange, but well beyond what might be expected, mentioning there's some kind of sex club that meets at the community room in the middle of the night. She can hear all the moaning all the way up here. Presumably the same weird chants Mel heard in the vents. Didn't really sound that sexy to me necessarily. Evil and sexy. Beatrice gives her a tarot card reading that reveals more clues to her history. Her past is filled with grief, thinking that she must have suffered as a child.
Is it this
In the
one?
present,
It was probably
she
this
thinks
one, right,
something
Puncture?
hidden has guided her here. Someone specifically. Mel tells her about trying to track down
Because you could set it up where it shoots out 3 and it like bounces between people, so it's kind of AoE.
The future is looking bleak too, pulling out the card of death. But Beatrice chuckles, it does have many meanings. Well, also still meaning death too. Mel checks out the mailbox, discovering a piece of mail sticking out from the mystery lady. Sam catches her in the act and offers her a skeleton key that she can use if she's really that desperate to get inside. He invites her to Tamara's one-act show that she's doing, hoping to rally an audience as it's not very good. Yeah, sounds great. Tamara's one-act opera. Woo! Getting ready for the show, she gets a surprise call from none other than
Yeah, I was
her
using that for a while
dad,
too, for the same
confirming
reason.
that she was indeed a patient of his, feeling that they made good progress in the past. He asks to call him back, but she is not interested in reconnecting, immediately stomping over and deleting the message. He calls Mark to inform him of what he learned, and the red-hooded stranger is back. He chases after him, but loses him at a barbed wire fence. He then attempts to reach Virgil, wanting to know if someone else is here with him at the facility, and the lady on the phone immediately assumes that he must be mentally distressed. He maintains his cool, saying that it's just a question,
Yeah,
nothing
true.
more. Again, it's like people want him to lose his marbles. It's like every chance. You need a shrink? You good, bro? He talks over things with his pal Ratty, and he's shocked to find that Secret of Nim tape on the shelf, confident that his pal will like it. After putting it on, the man is back, who turns out it's actually his dad. He follows him downstairs, around several winding corridors. Walking by another, it appears that he's suddenly in a different location entirely, somehow at the Visser himself. He sees someone down the hall at their door. He walks up after and knocks, and shockingly, it's Mel that opens up. Right as she does so, though, he wakes up back in the compound. The next tape is at Tamara's show, which of course Mel films the entire time. The stage is covered in people wearing white masks, dancing around to a weird thumping soundtrack. It intensifies into that eerie theme tune, which again affects Mel. The lights flash, intensely hearing her heartbeat quicken, and Sam whisks her away. We learn that he's a teacher at Columbia, and he asks about her camera, Mel telling him that it was a present from her mom, wanting to follow in her footsteps, especially after her somewhat recent passing. She brings up the big rumor about the sex club, and he can't help but laugh, correcting that she must be referring to the Visser Historical Society. He's not technically a member, he alleges, but does talks there on occasion. The last one about Dutch witchcraft that existed until the 20th century in Lower Manhattan. I wonder if that has any relevance here. Yeah. They walk back to the Visser, and Sam hands over that skeleton key for her after all, and she kind of randomly starts making out with him. Seems kind of sudden, but you know, whatever. He runs off to get some booze, and she takes a chance to open the mailbox, but alas, it's empty. The romantic interlude is interrupted by Annabelle showing up, already asking all kinds of questions about the hot guy she saw from the window. Geez, she's kind of a lot, huh? Sam arrives, and rather than stick around, elects to do this another time. Annabelle keeps filming, chiding her friend for having so many secrets. She's gonna have to spill them all. The next day, Ratty has made a real mess, and when grabbing a broom, he notices a spot in a wall that sounds hollow. So he busts a hole in it, uncovering a tunnel that leads to another downstairs area. There's even more locked doors awaiting him down there, including one filled with binders marked Wellspring, the same DNA testing company from the opening, meaning that LMG must be connected. He then strangely finds himself in an old chapel.
Damn, just doubled my damage. More than doubled my damage on that skill.
There, and Dan confronts him about the real reason that he hired him. He knew his dad was on the tapes, right? Virgil maintains that he didn't know for sure and takes him to the Wellspring Records room. He calls their work here a gift, letting people know who they really are, but closed up shop when sinister agencies wanted access to the data. He pulls out a file on his dad and tells him that he understands if this is all a bit too much, if he's afraid of what he might find. According to reports, authorities said that his father had a breakdown, and he was responsible for the fire at the house. Dan is adamant that it was an accident. His father would never do that. But, well, he can't know for sure, right? Virgil informing him that he was placed on leave from his job, which Dan didn't know. He offers him a chance to quit here, but Dan refuses to give up and gets right back to the tapes. There, Mel hears more chanting in the vents and decides to track down the source. It's coming from the community room, seeing that it's full of various people, including Sam and Cassandra, all doing the rhythmic breathing in unison. At the front of the room is a cabinet holding a white statue. They wrap up the chant and everyone hugs. After they leave, she investigates the box, seeing it's the same symbol from outside the building emblazoned on it. Attempting to get it open, Tamara and Sam return, sending her hiding to the closet, where she has to sit silently while they pork, making weird animalistic growling sounds. Okay then. She frantically later tells Annabelle about what she saw, and upon hearing it, thinks that they should just leave. It's not that simple, as Mel isn't really here for her project, she reveals. She's looking for her birth mother, Julia Bennett. She got a letter from her, and the Visser was on the return address. Even if she wants nothing to do with her, not knowing her mom has been eating at her whole life, saying that she needs to know who she is. Annabelle vows to stay with her no matter what.
Already lagging again, damn.
Seeing it's Dan, tying back to his previous dream. Some kind of weird dream connection thing going on here. When she opens the door, no one is there. Dan meets up with Mark in town, revealing the increasingly complicated puzzle to him. The song that Colt has been chanting is the same that his sister played on the piano when they were kids. Everything is somehow connected. As for LMG, Mark has found that it has its hands in many different industries: real estate, defense, and even synthetic gemstone manufacturing. The iceberg is so huge that Wellspring didn't even show up, so it must be an offshoot of an offshoot of an offshoot. He was unable to find any of his dad's files, but did discover a wealth of recordings of his sessions, handing over a bag all marked with Mel's names. Well, that's a good lead. Dan struggles to figure out how the relationship soured.
Semi didn't just crash, it froze.
Apparently, Mel didn't die in the fire. She's alive and well in Pittsburgh. Whoa! Mind blow. Listening to the tapes, Mel fills his dad in on the specifics of her past. Her mom left her at St. Joseph, also leaving her a necklace with a ring attached. She spent the next 10 years there and was always in trouble. The Dons calling her damaged goods. When writing, something takes over her as she starts scribbling circle patterns on the page. She doesn't know what they are, but feels something pulling her, having to describe it to keep her from falling inside of it. She had these visions frequently until she left the church, but recently...
Oh, I died.
Steven
Imagine
is
that.
confident they can at least pinpoint her issues, and they're visited by a fluffy friend, Cleo. So they did meet, and the connection he first picked up on wasn't so crazy after all. As he wisely doesn't trust Virgil at this point,
Look at
he
this.
scours the
12
house for
gigs of
more
memory.
keys, and also found, despite
Blatantly,
himself
there's
being on the
something
internet,
wrong.
finds a mass of data cables. He was actually able to tap into it, and now has access to all the cameras in the house, so he can figure out where exactly he has privacy. Staring at a map, he suddenly appears in the community room with Mel, noticing little particles floating in the air. They can definitely see each other and formally introduce themselves. She whispers that the building is pretty weird, right? And of course he agrees. She then invites him out for a casual drink, like a Fanta or something, and there's a knock at the door that brings him back to the bathroom. Looks like there's some kind of in-between dream world
Let me
that
update my
Mel is
drivers.
reaching out to Dan through. There's a woman at the door saying her name is Bobby and that she works for Virgil. She excuses that she was supposed to put him in a different room as there's mold in this one. He's confused as there is no mold and dismisses her, saying he needs
Pain in the
privacy.
ass.
Mel then returns to the community room with Annabelle, detailing what she saw the last night. Cassandra enters, acting weird as always, sniffing Annabelle, and
Diablo 4 is
Mel,
royally
subject
fucking
of
up my
last
computer.
night, she fibs that she wasn't there, despite us clearly seeing
Ow.
otherwise. Something
It has
is
like some
definitely
memory
going on
leak,
up
and I
here.
looked it up, and a lot of people have this issue, but like, if you go to like a couple towns and like go in a couple dungeons, it like sucks up the memory and doesn't like free it back up. So it's not a memory leak. It just like
No, I
pumps it up until it just crashes the game. I'm updating my
I
drivers.
heard about that with there's like a VRAM leak issue.
Well, one of the devs came on and said it's not actually a leak, it's something else, but yeah, it's like same kind of feeling. But it's super pain in the ass. Like, it was doing it when I played before, but like, it was much less common. Now it's literally happening every like 15 minutes.
Mel and Steven talk
Well,
after,
their T-Rex
him
is dead.
thinking that it could be a number of things, but won't know for sure without a full medical workup. Her mom storms in, and obviously just didn't actually ask her permission to come here, even though she told Mel
Going
that she
aggro on
did.
the car
Mel
now.
attempts to apologize, but she tells her to stay out.
Yeah, it's not super common, I don't think, Panda, but it's definitely out there, and I definitely have it. I'm gonna do a complete clean install of my graphics drivers, and this stream actually might drop out. Actually, I'll probably have to restart my computer.